Kathy, stand by for us. CBS News reporter Jared Eggleston is there. Jared, tell us what you're seeing and what's happening.
Errol, good afternoon. As you might imagine, it is a very chaotic scene out here right now. I've been out here for about 10 minutes, and it is just families and parents and friends trying to find answers. Take a look and just show you. This is the school right in front of it right here. And within the last few minutes, we even had another one of the medical helicopters land here at the school. So that shows that it's still a very active scene out here right now. As I was coming over here, there were agencies from all over Metro Atlanta rushing to this scene as they try to figure out just what happened. Now, in addition to the authorities trying to find out what happened, so are those families, as you guys were just talking about. I've talked to several of the parents out here who are just waiting to hear from their kids and waiting to be reunited with their loved ones. And as you know, during these chaotic situations, sometimes it takes time, and that time for these families is definitely feels like hours, I'm sure.
Are you learning anything more about what transpired there on the scene? It looks like maybe we
trying to learn just what exactly. Are you there?
Yes, Jared, please, quickly. We have about 30 seconds.
Yes. Yeah, so the scene is still very chaotic. Governor Kemp, the governor of Georgia here, has said that he is directing all agencies to find out just what exactly happened here. The school district confirming that an event did happen here, but no exact details yet. We expect to learn those very soon, and of course, we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, Jared, we want you to stay safe as you speak with anxious parents there and, of course, disturbed students who had been unnerved by this. Our viewers are now looking at a statement from Georgia's governor, effectively saying he is making all available resources available to cover this incident on what we understand to be a potential shooting at a high school there in Georgia this morning, with the FBI responding, potential casualties, and a suspect in custody. You're in the right place for all the information on this. Stay with us here at CBS News 24/7 as we now prepare for a special report with more of the latest information. But you're looking at the sheriff vehicle, EMTs aiding potentially injured students, faculty, or staff. And it appears it has happened once again here in the U.S.
Yes, and we continue to bring you the very scant details that we have as we have it. This is Appalachia High School in Georgia. It's about an hour northeast of Atlanta. We know that the school there has evacuated all of the students to the football field. Those students are now being reunited with their family members. All the other area schools are on soft lockdown in the district right now. Parents are being urged not to come to try and collect their students at this time. As you can imagine, there are lots of logistics that law enforcement and school officials are trying to sort through to make sure that everyone stays safe. As we learn the details about what exactly transpired there, any number of casualties, we will continue to bring you the updated facts. We do have Jared on the ground there. Jared, are you still with us?
Kathy Guider, I understand, is still with us. Kathy, you were mentioning how experiencing something like this can be unnerving for students, perhaps panic attacks, perhaps, you know, a reaction filled with anxiety. What are some of your concerns as we watch this unfold?
Right. I'm, worried about those students. As a mother, as a, retired law enforcement, my thought is, keep people safe, get them away from the situation. I'm positive that the school will provide counseling, maybe today, tomorrow, definitely all this week, for those students. You want to give them some peace of mind in the situation, and obviously they can see all the law enforcement that is on site. They can see the ambulances, they know people are coming to assist and to help them. And that's what you want them to know, is that, the adults have it from here.
And as one of those adults who, as a former FBI special agent, you would investigate these types of incidences. What is happening? Tell us a little bit more about what would be happening on the ground, because we do know that there are FBI agents there that are coordinated along with local law enforcement, the school district. The governor has okayed all resources as necessary. As we're trying to piece together this puzzle, what does the investigation look like at this point?
So right now, you will have agents on site who are working with the other law enforcement, the local law enforcement, the state law enforcement. They're trying to gather as much intelligence as they can on the shooter, on the victim, in the school and, in the situation that's at hand. So you've got people on site working, very quickly to get the information, but you also have those agents relaying that information to intelligence analysts back in the office, and those intelligence analysts are doing, their speediest work and their best work.
And Kathy, sorry to interrupt, but on that point that you've just made, I want to share with our viewers that we do have a statement just released from the White House, and it says President Biden has been briefed by his Homeland Security advisor on this tragic shooting, as they describe it, at Appalachia High School. His administration, the statement goes on to say, will continue with coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as they get more information. So as the folks on the scene are sharing intelligence with the field office, what difference does it make that the president is watching and that he is saying he will coordinate and make sure all resources are available as well?
That's helpful in the fact that the various agencies then know we're all working together. We are going to use all our resources. It's not just one agency having to fund this or supply the people, that all people are going to be working together. So they're going to continue the work they're doing, because right now they're just trying to gather the information, get it to the intelligence analysts who will do the deep dives and the digging, online, through email accounts, through social media accounts. So a lot of work is being done by a lot of people on site and off site.
Kathy, thank you for that.
We want to bring in now former Bergen County, New Jersey police chief and lecturer at John Jay College, Brian Higgins. Brian, as a former police chief, how does a department respond to a type of incident like this?
Well, what we've seen unfold is exactly what we would expect: a massive police response to move as quickly as possible to the scene and into the school. First to stop the shooting, and then to render aid to victim as quickly as possible. And that appears to be happening as we watch this.
It's so disturbing to watch, Brian, because we've all been here before. And if you are a high school age person, you've only lived a life where there is a constant threat of school shootings. The suspect is in custody, though. And we don't always...
Well, a suspect is in custody.
At least one suspect, we should say, in custody. That will provide some intelligence and some information on what is still an early investigation. How helpful is that? And how will they be speaking with this at least one suspect now in order to make sure everyone is safe?
It's extremely helpful on two fronts. First, in the investigation into the school shooting itself, how this unfolded, how the shooter or shooters came to be in possession of these firearms, what motivated them to perpetrate this shooting. And then on a larger scale, every time we have a school shooting or a mass shooting like this, we're moving closer to that point where someday we can see these things start to go in the opposite direction, reduce the numbers, and ultimately there will be a day when we won't see these school shootings. You make a very good point about we're here again. I am a father of a teenager who will start high school tomorrow, his second year, and this is the kind of thing that is in the back of every parent's mind.
What do you tell your kid?
Well, first of all, I tell him how he should react during one of these situations, and I tell him even if it's an exercise, a practice run, or a lockdown, if he's not in a classroom, he's not with an adult like a teacher, that he should get out of the scene as quickly as possible. And we'll worry about any ramifications later on. So that's the number one thing I tell my student, my son, is be aware of your surroundings and then be ready to get away as quickly as possible.
So that's interesting. You actually have had this conversation with your son. You are an expert in this area, and you have an agreement that, in a way, supersedes what the school tells the student at that time, because in your view, it's more important for the student to get away from the unsafe situation.
It's more on filling in the blanks. If he's with a teacher, he's in a classroom, their procedures are good. I know his school, I know his school security program, but there are those little gap areas, those gray areas, like if he's in a hallway, if he's going to the bathroom, if he's not around teachers. So I just kind of fill in the areas, but many of these schools have good protocols, have good security programs. They have relationship with local police, and it's good for the students to follow those. But I want him to also think on his own.
It's a really interesting point, and parents all have to make these decisions for themselves. We now want to get to our local affiliate coverage there from WANF to see what new information they may be uncovering.
Lawrenceville Police Department cars making their way down towards Appalachia High School.
Chelsea, these cars that we see, the law enforcement vehicles, are they heading to the school or away from the school?
The ones that you just saw zooming past us are actually heading away from the school. So, unclear where those are going, but we are being told that one suspect is in custody. So, of course, they have a lot more investigating to do here as well, trying to figure out what the motive was behind this and what led up to the shooting.
We should mention, when you see the word, we have the word casualties on the screen right now, when police talk about casualties, that could mean that someone has been killed or injured.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that the person, the casualty, is dead. It could be someone who has been killed or injured. And so the number of casualties at this point, we don't know. We have not gotten that information, but we have seen so many ambulances. Adam was talking about 6 to 8 ambulances that he had witnessed himself, just sort of, speeding away from the scene. We also did witness someone put it into a helicopter and choppered to Grady Memorial Hospital. This is video, not live, but video of one of those airvacs, the one that has a patient in it that left the scene. This is probably about an hour or so ago that this took place. And so the original calls, just to catch you up here at 12:40 on this Wednesday afternoon, the original calls came in just after 10:20 this morning. Reports of gunfire at Appalachia High School. Police then responded to those calls. And we've gotten this statement from the Barrow County Sheriff's Department as we take a look at these live pictures of parents walking to the campus of Appalachia High School to be reunited. They're praying with their children. That at approximately 10:23, officers from multiple law enforcement agencies and fire EMS personnel were dispatched to the high school in reference to a reported active shooting. One suspect is in custody and casualties have been reported. Details on the number or their conditions is not available at this time. And again, this is video. These are not live pictures. This is video that we've been gathering over the last 90 minutes or so since we first went on the air with this, showing you the scene, which at various times has been active or I don't want to say inactive, because obviously there's a lot going on there. Right. But we've seen a lot of law enforcement sort of walking around without the sense of urgency that you would expect if there was an active shooter still at large. And when we say that there's one person in custody, we don't know whether or not there are any other suspects that they're looking for.
All right, that was coverage from our local station WANF on what we believe to be a school shooting in Winder, Georgia, at Appalachia High School. There, the police say that there is a suspect in custody, and casualties, whether those are fatalities or not, we do not know, have been reported.
A CBS News special report begins right now.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell in New York, and we are coming on the air with breaking news with another school shooting. This time about 45 miles northeast of Atlanta in Barrow County, Georgia. Now, the local sheriff's department said a suspect is in custody and there are reports of casualties. Police say the alleged shooting occurred at about 10:23 a.m. at Appalachia High School, which has about 1,900 students. So it is a big high school. Parents, we're told, are now allowed to go to the campus and pick up their students. Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp issued a statement saying he has directed all available state resources to respond to the incident. The FBI's Atlanta office said it has agents on the scene to help coordinate and support local law enforcement efforts. CBS's Jared Eggleston is on the scene in Georgia, and he joins us now with the very latest. Jared, tell us what you see. What happened this morning?
Nora, good afternoon. Out here on the scene right now, it's still very active, a very chaotic scene. Within the last few minutes, even another life flight helicopter landed here on the property of the school that you can see just over my shoulder. Now, parents here on the scene, they swarmed here. As I got here, there were cars in about every mile, about a mile radius around the school, with parents just leaving their cars on the side of the road so that they could rush to the school to be reunified with their students. Now, I've been talking with some of the parents as I've been out here over the last half hour or so, and a lot of them are just anxiously awaiting the return of their students. And as you mentioned, Nora, the school is working on reunifying the students and their families right now.
Jared, can you describe how many ambulances were on the scene? How many of those life flight helicopters have you seen?
I've seen at least two circling the school since I got here. And like I said, one of them actually landed. I would say at least 30 to 50 ambulances are here on the scene. They're still here on the scene right now. Some of them have started to leave even just as we've been talking, Nora. But there's a lot of ambulances here and a lot of police responses as well. As I was coming here, there's one highway that will get you to the school. It was constantly more first responders, more ambulances, more police coming to the school to assist with that response.
And Jared, describe the area for us.
This is a rural area outside of Atlanta. If you're familiar with Georgia, it is in between Atlanta and Athens, where the University of Georgia is. This is one of a growing community around Atlanta, one of the bigger areas where a lot of people are moving out in the suburbs. So it is rural, but it is still a very big suburb of Atlanta. And as you said, Nora, this is also one of the bigger high schools in the county.
How long have parents been able to come and pick up their students? When did the lockdown end?
The lockdown ended about, I would say, a half hour, 45 minutes ago. Right when I got on the scene was when the school district actually made a release saying that an incident did happen here at this school and that parents would then be able to be reunified with their students. And as I've been standing here, the police keep directing the families towards that scene where they want everyone to kind of meet that reunification point. But a lot of people, as you know, Nora, are just so nervous about what has happened here right now. So that has led to some of the chaos that we're still seeing here on the scene.
CBS's Jared Eggleston on the scene, this developing situation. Just to repeat, one suspect in custody at this hour. There are casualties, and as Jared described, dozens, in his words, of ambulances were on the scene, including those helicopters, to help with some of those casualties. Want to bring in now our CBS News law enforcement expert, Rodney Harrison. He is a former police commissioner from the New York City area. And Rodney, now that this suspect is in custody, what are the next steps for law enforcement?
Yeah, so we have to take a closer look at our subject and identify, is he a lone wolf? Is he involved with somebody else? Was he put up to this? Also, we have to take a look at the other local schools and make sure that those schools are evacuated as well. So we have to find out what was the motive, what caused this individual to be involved with this active shooter and do such a horrible incident, but also make sure that the surrounding schools are safe going forward. And that's important regarding getting kids out of the schools, evacuating those schools, and getting them home safely to their families.
Mm-hmm. And Rodney, this has become all too common in America, these school shootings. What is the profile of a school shooter like this?
You know, it's unfortunate that these school shooters come in different forms and fashion and different sizes and different shapes. Listen, you know, it could be anything from someone being bullied at school to somebody that just wants to use this as a platform to get a message across. So there is no cookie cutter way of looking at anybody that does this act of violence. But I will say this is important, that all local law enforcement work with their local school districts to make sure that they have things in place because these incidents are happening too often.
Our CBS News law enforcement expert, Rodney Harrison, thank you very much. And just to update, one suspect in custody after authorities received a report of an active shooting at Appalachia High School, which is about 45 miles northeast of Atlanta. The school went into lockdown. Number of ambulances and helicopters on the scene to transport casualties to local hospitals. At this hour, according to the local sheriff's office, parents are allowed to come pick up their kids. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news. And then tonight, we will have a full wrap-up on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in New York.
All right, we continue to gather new information from this breaking news event out of Georgia. You're seeing as police respond to a school shooting at a high school in Winder.
A suspect is in custody, and police say that casualties, though the extent of those casualties and the number, we do not know, though casualties have been reported. There are also reports that a teacher may have been shot at Appalachia High School in Barrow County. That's roughly an hour northeast of Atlanta. CBS News has not been able to independently verify this information about a teacher, though.
Video that we've been watching from the school shows emergency crews arriving there. Our Jared Eccleston mentioned that he saw dozens of ambulances on the highway and arriving at the high school. We know students have been told to gather at the football field where it's been secured. Kathy Guider joins us now on the phone. She's familiar with incidents like this when information is scarce. But Kathy, what happens next, considering one suspect is in custody, there may be some casualties, and parents still need to reconnect with their kids?
Right. Well, law enforcement's priority right now will be interviewing that one suspect. They're going to try to get as much information as they can, regarding the motive, regarding the planning, things of that nature, while other personnel on site would be working on the reunification of parents and students. So there's going to be a couple of different tracks being worked here by different groups of people.
Anna Schechter is actually here with us in Studio 57 as well, so we want to bring her in. But Kathy, don't go anywhere. We may have more questions for you. Anna is the senior coordinating producer for CBS News' Crime and Public Safety Unit. So, Anna, you are familiar, unfortunately, with cases like this. You're also a mom as well. When you're looking at and trying to assess what is happening in a situation like this, what are you looking for?
Well, we're right at the start of school. We're right after a holiday weekend. This follows, sadly, trends that we've seen school shootings around the time of holidays, the beginning of the school year. And unfortunately, it's actually become so common that we've tracked school shootings throughout the year. They happen not just inside the school. That's how we count the number of school shootings. But there's a huge number that happen in the parking lot. So they're still at the school, but they're not always counted as a school shooting. So we talk about securing the school building, and yet many shootings occur just outside of the walls of the school. So I'm looking for exactly where this happened, what kind of security plan the school had in place, and of course the numbers. We're watching. The Sheriff's Department put out a statement. I got an email from the PR person. It's still at casualties. They are not confirming reported numbers out there of the number of casualties, the number of dead and injured. And so we do not have that number at this time, and so we are holding that. But there are multiple agencies on the scene, multiple officers, as you saw, all responding to this. The call was made at 10:23 this morning, so we're a couple of hours after that. Everything is moving very quickly.
And one of the things that strikes me as you speak about the risk to students, not just on campus, but near campus, is that in some cases, and it's common in the South as well, you have a type of open campus where each building will not be connected by hallways, but you'll go from building to building. We can see the football field here, which of course is wide open, but on a campus with 1,900 students that might be an open campus, How do officials secure such a massive space and so many people? I would imagine that it's effectively impossible to protect against absolutely every threat.
It's a huge challenge. And with each school shooting, we see different tactics used and a different layout of the building. And so we're almost playing a game of whack-a-mole. Like, as soon as one shooting happens, then we try to implement procedures, metal detectors, for example, to prevent the shooter from bringing a weapon inside. And yet in an open setting like that, we saw the footage, the drone footage, where you see students walking over to the football field, in the stands. There is a school is not just inside the walls of a classroom. And so there are multiple targets. It's so shocking and upsetting right at the start of the school year. We're sitting here in New York City, and tomorrow is the first day in the public school system. My kids had their first day today, and this is happening, and unfortunately it's just commonplace in our country.
Yeah, and even though these students have been in school for, they started in August, this is still the beginning of the school year, and this is how, unfortunately, we are starting it. Kathy, as Anna was talking about all the different things that she is assessing at this moment, and I'm thinking about the reports that we still haven't substantiated yet, but that maybe a teacher was shot. Given your experience in the FBI as a special agent, what might that tell you about potential motives or what might have transpired inside the school?
Likely, and this is pure speculation, that a teacher, as an adult, tried to intervene, tried to step in, tried to stop the shooter, that they took some type of action, to prevent and protect other students, their students in the classroom or in a hallway.
Too much to ask of a teacher, but unfortunately, we do know that heroic story is one that has played out multiple times before. We also have with us Brian Higgins, a former police chief. Brian, you have experienced the law enforcement aspect on the ground, the local authorities. How are they interacting now as this has become something that is gaining national attention, the president himself paying attention to what's happening in Georgia?
Well, we saw from the initial outset of this incident that the multiple law enforcement agencies responded. They worked together seamlessly to go into the school, and we see that at least one suspect was arrested immediately or very shortly after police responded. And then they began to work through the school to find victims and bring students out and get them reunified with their parents. That will continue. It's going to continue. They're going to continue to search that school to make sure that there are no other victims, that there are no other shooters, and they're going to work together in an investigation, investigating the shooter, any contact this individual would have with others, how the weapons were acquired, and what the motivation may be for the shooting.
And Brian, one thing you shared with us a short time ago is that you've had conversations with your son about what to do in a situation like this. Our Jared Eggleston was sharing that some parents left their cars on the road and walked to campus to reunite with their kids. And I'm wondering for you also as a parent, I don't know how old your kids are, but I would imagine for any parent, you have to make a decision as to when you have this conversation and what to do in case of a school shooting incident. Have you had that conversation? And if not, when would you and how would you?
I think the key is to talk about this in an age-appropriate way, which is very challenging, but you can start talking to your kids at a younger age. There is research about how to do that, and I'm not qualified to give advice about that, but I think you have to be very careful about the age of the kids. But at this point, children should have and experts and officials have said there should be an action plan. And running it first, they've actually changed the guidance that they're giving kids. So instead of hiding, when we saw that in Uvalde with the kids being kind of holed up in classrooms, sometimes sitting ducks, they've changed their guidance. So you want to run first, get away from the situation. That is the latest guidance that law enforcement gives, which is a change from years past based on what's happened at multiple school shootings over the last few years. So that's important. Run, hide,
Fight.
and then fight.
Yeah.
Yes.
Jarring that that would now have to be standard education for students, and families all need to have this type of conversation. Kathy Guider, I think you may still be with us on the phone, retired FBI analyst. If you are, what's the guidance on this advice? What should parents be telling their kids to do if there is a shooting on campus?
You know, that's tricky in some ways. Definitely you follow the instruction given to you by your classroom instructor or your principal, whoever, you know, might be the one. But as one of your other guests said, you know, if they're in the hallway, if they're coming out of a bathroom and they're not with an adult, you know, a teacher, an educator, someone, then they need to make their own decision. And I, too, have said the same thing to my child, that, you know, you get away from the threat. Remove yourself from the threat as quickly as possible. So, you know, that kind of thing is, I think, what we want to tell our children. But if you're inside a classroom or you're with a teacher, you need to go with what that adult is telling them at that particular time.
Well, that's a really important detail, though. So if a student somehow is by themselves on campus, coming from the restroom, an incident goes down, they're alone, the guidance is get to safety. Do not be, as Anna referenced, a sitting duck. If there's no teachers around, no official guidance, get out.
Correct. Or get to a safe spot. If, you know, let's say there's a janitor's closet and it's a 2x4 closet and you can get in there and you can lock that door, that might be your best safe spot. If you feel that you have the access and the ability, physically, mentally, to get yourself out, then that may be the better option.
Run, hide, and fight. Unfortunately, those are the guidance, that's the updated guidance that we have for our children now as we are starting a new school year with this unfortunate news, a school shooting at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. Scant details about the number of casualties, though we do know that the police say that there is at least one subject in custody. We are still gathering additional information, and we'll bring you that as we have it.
That's right. One suspect in custody, casualties reported. The president is aware of this and watching. The FBI is on scene providing resources and details. We've watched families anxiously try to reunite with their loved ones, and you're seeing footage here of someone, an official moments ago who had an armed, a weapon with him. We're going to continue gathering information. Stay right here on CBS News 24/7 for more. Next, we're going to bring you CBS News 24/7 from San Francisco.
CBS News 24/7 continues breaking news coverage of a school shooting out of Georgia. Our eye on Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. That's about an hour outside of Atlanta, and here's your headline at this hour. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the local sheriff there confirm a shooting at that school and casualties. They also confirm one suspect is in custody. Now let's take you back in time as we look at some of the video that our partners have been able to get from that scene. The school went on lockdown quickly after the first calls came out of that high school around 10:23 a.m. Georgia time. Police and emergency personnel raced to the scene as that school quickly went on that lockdown. Then dozens of police units, ambulances surrounded the school. We've even seen video of helicopters landing there. Students also taken to a football stadium where it appears there's a track facility to sort of corral all of those students in one area. Reporters on the scene tell us that multiple ambulances have taken victims to trauma units nearby. Now, that same reporter saying more than one medical helicopter also taking victims to a trauma center. We can tell you there is a response from leadership there in the state of Georgia. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp looking at video just like you are looking at here on the stream, and moments ago directed all state resources to respond to aid in this incident. We also know interagency cooperation continues with the FBI. The feds are on this one. They are coordinating in that response at the high school. Again, this is at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. about 50 miles away from Atlanta. And that's where we find CBS News reporter Jared Eggleston. He's been live on this scene for about an hour. So our eyes have been on ambulances. We've been hearing the reports of helicopters. Just how many ambulances have you seen coming and going from that scene?
Read, over the last hour or so, ambulances, I would say dozens, 2 or 3 dozen ambulances have been coming and going from this scene here. That has sort of died down within the last 15 minutes or so. But you mentioned those medical helicopters. That one that I saw circling when I first got here landed, but it's still here. And then the other one that was circling also left. But there is still a significant police presence here, and also a significant parent preference. One of the parents telling me that she went over to the football field to try to get her student and that she was having trouble. The school is still trying to count these students. So as you know, in these very fluid breaking news situations, it's a lot of chaos and a lot of people just searching for answers. Those people who are really searching for answers right now are the parents who are just trying to reunite with their loved ones, their students.
And Jared, we're seeing on the screen those ambulances right there. And just a second ago, we saw one person being loaded onto that ambulance. We want to be clear to our viewers who are watching all over the world right now on CBS News 24/7. We do not know what casualties mean in this case. We do not know if any of the victims of this shooting are teachers or students. That all is information that is yet to come. But right there, you see community members there. One person taking off his shirt to put on one of the persons who's sitting there with a blanket over them. Also, we're seeing right now, Jared, on the screen, emergency personnel going into that school. Others gathered right there by a stretcher underneath the Georgia and the American flag flying. We know in these cases that every time we hear of a bullet flying in a school, this is somebody that's involved. That's no doubt got to be the heartbeat of all of these parents who are coming to the scene. Where are the parents right now? What are they being told about getting their students out of that school?
Initially, when I got here, I was along this sidewalk right in front of the school where a lot of the media has gathered, and it was just swarmed with parents. A lot of them even left their cars as they just rushed towards the school. A lot of the parents have moved over towards the football stadium over here so that they could be reunited. But as I said, a lot of the parents are still kind of rushing to the scene. I would say for about a mile or 2 radius around the school, parents are just ditching their cars on side streets, on areas where you wouldn't normally park a car. That's an active roadway, and rushing over to that football stadium to try to get answers. I do know that the students have been evacuated out there, and the school district says that they are actively working to reunite the students and the families.
We also want to let our viewers know that it is our understanding that a suspect is in custody. That may inform our view and our understanding of why it looks like there's some movement there. Jared, we'll check back in with you a little bit later here on the stream. Thank you for that report. We know you have a lot of work to do today. So we also have a CBS affiliate coverage that we want to get you to right now. Often, these stories are best told right there on the ground level with our network of CBS partners. Let's listen into their coverage.
Yeah, Lana, we have been speaking with parents, but I want to bring in Mark Knotts. He's a witness. He lives across the street from the high school. You don't have any children, Mark, but you said that you live across the street, and just tell us what you heard this morning.
Well, this morning when I woke up, I heard gunshots, and several of them. I couldn't tell exactly how many, so I went outside to smoke my cigarette like I do every morning. And I noticed about 5 minutes after that, cop cars were everywhere. Surrounding 6 counties were everywhere. I'm talking about 1,000 cop cars. And I knew something was seriously wrong. And then I seen all the cars pulling on the side of the road and everything. And I just, I pray that, everybody's all right. And the people that have passed away, if there has been anybody, I just pray for their families and everything. And like I said, I just had to get away, and I'm just commuting to the store real quick. So,
shortly after you heard those gunshots, did people start coming out of the school?
It was crazy. It looked like I didn't really pay no attention to it at first. I was like, this sounded like they were at the school. And I look over, and then the alarms started going off, like the school alarms, and people were going out around the school, and like they're doing like the drill, like the fire drill stuff is what I seen. And then I knew something was seriously wrong then. And you don't hear about that happening. You hear about it happening all around the world, but it just shows that it can happen anywhere. And
this community is pretty small, tight knit. I mean, it's usually
there's no seriously gunplay or nothing like that goes on around Bethlehem. It hasn't been for years. It hasn't been that I can remember. And I'm 35 years old, so it's not really likely. So apparently, I don't know. I don't have no details, but apparently something was going on with somebody's mental. So that just shows that people need to be more aware of their children, if it was a child, about their mental mental state, because nobody never knows what the next man can do.
And, you
No
know,
matter what age
those
they
are details we're still trying to work out as far as what happened and what the motive may have been. But thank you so much, Mark, for your time. You as well. And Mark was telling us he lives right across from the high school. He says, of course, it's just been chaos out there this morning. All kinds of police officers, parents, children. He was actually walking towards us with his head down. He said, I just need to step away from this for a little bit. He said he's walking up to the store to just take a breath. I mean, even people that really aren't involved with what happened at the school, this is a very highly emotional time for everybody in this community, guys.
Yeah, Chelsea, he mentioned mental health, and Representative Esther Panich actually did say that today. I know there's still a lot more emphasis on what has happened, but she did note for anybody affected or traumatized by what's happening right now at Appalachia High School, you can dial 988 and get help. This is such a horrible situation. And Chelsea, while we still have you here, I just wanted you to see if you could fill in what you've been hearing from parents. I know we don't have anybody who's willing to go live with you right now. As you can imagine, they are just trying to get to their babies and try to figure out what's going on there. But can you just fill us in of what you've heard from parents that you've talked to as they've rushed by you to get to the school?
Yeah, you know, we spoke with a grandmother who is very distraught. She was walking down the street here. Her grandson is okay, and she's so thankful that he's okay. But she said he was in the room where a classmate was shot. So she's very thankful that her grandson is doing fine. But she says, of course, mentally, this is going to be very hard and something he's not going to forget the rest of his life. We also spoke with another woman who said she was the older sister of a girl here that's 14 years old. And she was also racing down this street here to get there and pick her sister up. She said she was okay, but was completely shaken up. Said she got a phone call from her crying this morning saying there's an active shooter. Please come pick me up. And I think we do have some of that soundbite that we'll play for you now. Is she okay if you talk to her?
Yeah, I've talked to her. She's a little nervous. They're on the football field waiting on the parents to come get them. She's very nervous.
Did she hear the gunshot?
I don't know. She didn't tell me. She just called us and said, could you hurry up and come get us? There's an active shooter here. And my first thing was to make sure she was okay. Nobody was hurt. So that's my biggest concern.
When you heard there was an active shooter?
Yeah, my heart started beating. I was actually on my way to go to work. And then I just dropped everything and I just got in the car and I left. The traffic was so bad at the front. I was in the middle of the red light and people were blowing, but there was nothing I could do. So the main thing is to make sure these kids are okay. So
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You have a good luck. Be safe. And you can see we did that interview as she was, you know, almost jogging down to the school. This road here, Tom Miller Road, you can see people walking down it still at this hour, trying to get here, get off work and collect their children from the high school following the shooting that took place here this morning. Again, a lot of parents have made contact with their children and learned that they're okay, but we did speak with another mom who came up to us crying. She said she couldn't get in touch with her son, who's a senior here, was asking us for information, which of course we're still trying to get for everybody at home as well. We know that the sheriff's office is going to be holding a press conference shortly that Adam Murphy will be covering for us, guys.
All right, Chelsea, thanks very much. Your heart goes out to all.
You're watching CBS News 24/7, dipping into our CBS partner there in Winder, Georgia. Once again, the headline, a school shooting at Appalachia High School. And we want to get you these late-breaking details from 2 law enforcement sources. We can now confirm 2 dead, 4 wounded, suspect now in custody. So a lot to unpack here. I'm just hearing right now that law enforcement is going to give us that promised news conference that you just heard our partner in the field talk about. Let's go ahead and listen in right now.
2 minutes. That'd be wonderful.
All right. So here's what happens in situations like these. Once in a while, they come to the microphone, but then they stop to gather a little bit more information. So we understand any moment now that law enforcement official will step to the microphone and really in these situations give us very clear information. We have been able to confirm through those 2 law enforcement sources, once again, 2 dead, 4 wounded. But in situations like these, one of the challenges for law enforcement, in addition to making sure that they get the suspect, in addition to making sure that the wounded get to where they need to get, in addition to keeping the scene tight so that people are safe and that investigation can be bulletproof, so to speak. A terrible term to use there, but so that they can really investigate and do a good job in their investigation. The other thing that they need to do is clear through any misinformation that might spread on social media. We live in times right now that what you see on X may not immediately be true. So those news conferences are important things to happen because that is where you hear it directly from the people who are there at the scene. They will be able to tell us more about the injured, the victims, and how this all played out. So let's go ahead now and listen in. It appears he is getting ready to speak right now. Once again, outside of a high school, Appalachia High School, Winder, Georgia. We understand 1,900 students went to school there this morning expecting to get an education, but instead terror at school. Listen.
Smith, I'm the sheriff of Bexar County Sheriff's Office. We're standing on the campus of Appalachia High School here at Bexar County Schools. First and foremost, I want to lift up our community. I want to give our sympathies to our community, our school system, our kids, our parents that had to witness this today. Obviously, what you see behind us is an evil thing today. At about 9:30 this morning, we received the first call that there was an active shooter on this campus. We're not releasing any information as far as injuries, but we have multiple injuries. This is a very, very fluid investigation. It's very early. And I have asked the assistance of the GBI and the agencies here behind me today, and there are multiple agencies that responded this morning to help us and help the sheriff's office. We do have a suspect in custody. And we are asking for your patience as the media to please let us get the facts that we need to make sure we get this right. Again, I've asked the GBI to help us, the Sheriff's Office, to help us along with this. I know this is not what you want to hear, but I'm not going to answer questions after this is over with. But I wanted to give you the respect and our community respect to let them know what was going on initially. We're in the process of reunifying our students with their parents. Obviously, that's chaotic, but we want to be respectful of them and their privacy as well. I want to thank the state, the federal agencies, the local agencies that showed up today, as you can see, the multiple EMS and fire from other agencies that responded today. Again, I ask that you lift up Bexar County Schools, lift up Appalachia, lift up our agencies. This is going to take multiple days for us to get answers as to what happened and why this happened. But I wanted to give you a statement. It is our hope, in conjunction with these people behind us, that we can give you another statement around 4 o'clock, because I know you have to go back on the air. That is my hope. But I wanted to be fluid with you all, understanding that it's fluid as well with this investigation. I appreciate you being patient with us. Again, it's very active and is ever developing. Every minute is developing on what we're finding. So we're going to have releases from other schools. Again, we ask that you be patient with us. Please be patient with us. And hopefully I can give you more information or more better information, if you will, this afternoon. Thank you all for coming out here. We'll be back shortly, okay?
Sheriff, it's been widely reported that people are dead. Is that true?
I'm not releasing any information. We have multiple injuries.
Can you say if the person in custody is an adult or a juvenile?
I'm not releasing any information. Guys, I'm not going to answer any more questions. It's time, okay? Thank you.
All right, so as these things go, we are hearing just a little bit more information. That sheriff saying he's not going to release any more information, but CBS News, through 2 law enforcement sources, has been able to confirm 2 dead, 4 injured. Let's listen into the next person stepping to the mic.
Following us on Twitter, X, make sure you're following us. We'll be providing updates then. I know there are a lot of details, investigative details. You want more information. That is what the investigators are actively working on right now. Anything to add?
Yeah, so the idea will be to be back here at 4 o'clock, but keep an eye on our social media. If that changes, you'll know it. We'll be able to address, hopefully answer more questions for you, okay? Or be in a position to give you more answers. We'll just have to see how things go.
We just realized this was happening. Tell us how many people, what you know about that.
We're not in any kind of position. The sheriff's made his comments. We'll leave it at that. By 4 o'clock, we hope to have a better picture, a bigger so you can better comprehend what's going on. Okay, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so you are seeing a measured response by officials there outside of Appalachia High School right now. And that's how often these things go. They go out and they want to let the public know just what they are able to say, but they have to be very careful about what they say and when they say it. They said they do not want to get this wrong. However, this stuck out to me, and I'm sure it stuck out to you watching right now on the stream. That sheriff calling what happened there at Appalachia High School an evil thing. He said what happened and why it happened will take many days to figure out. So once again, a shooting at Appalachia High School, Winder, Georgia. This is a small community, but a large high school. 1,900 students inside that high school went to school this morning, all of them expecting a good day at school. That good day ended around 10:23 a.m. when the first calls for help, Georgia time, came in, and then all of that huge police response that happened. So right now, when you think about it, there are students and teachers who are getting word right now that someone who shared those halls, more than one someone who shared those halls, have lost their lives or are in the hospital fighting for their lives in a trauma center, we understand. Some taken by ambulance, others rushed to the hospital by helicopter right off of that football field that you saw there outside of Appalachia High School. And so now it begins the effort of finding out their conditions, but also finding out what the motive is. And when you look at a large crime scene like this, and that is what this high school is at this hour, it is an active crime scene. That means that law enforcement have to draw a circle around it and they have to protect the evidence that's on the inside of that. We do know one person is in custody. That person will be key and crucial in finding information about the motive here. But also, as I learned covering the Las Vegas mass shooting at the Harvest Festival in Las Vegas, all of the witnesses who saw this, people who were in that area, they also, in addition to being traumatized, in addition to being horrified, they also become police witnesses. And that is another component of this investigation as this plays out. These things become very large puzzle pieces in an overall picture that you heard the sheriff say is going to come together. And so now those students who were in that area will now be brought into rooms and they will be asked, what did you see and when did you see it, as they try to get that picture. Now, these are live images there on the ground, and you're seeing parents start to come to that area. They've been told to go over to a football field to reunify with their student. You can see that one parent waving with one hand, a cell phone to her ear in the other hand. You can only imagine that very long and horrible walk, hoping that your student is among those that you can reunify with. All right, so let's talk about the investigation a little bit more. We want to bring in former NYPD Detective Sergeant and adjunct professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Felipe Rodriguez. Felipe, thank you for joining us on the stream right now. This is a very large crime scene. First of all, take us to what happens in the moments after a call like that, and then we'll take this step by step through your understanding.
Well, first of all hands on deck. We have a huge campus, much larger than what we usually see in New York City. We have 1,900 students that we're responding to. We have multiple calls, I'm pretty sure, for 911 calls that are flooding the systems. So as the officers are responding, they have to try to make sense of what's going on and formulate a game plan, how we're going to address this, how we're going to respond, how we're going to get first aid to this situation, how we're going to get EMS rolling. So there's just so much going on that we have to put in place. These officers have to then form a tactical response. How we're going to go in there and quickly stop the immediate threat, because that's what we need to these days. No longer can we wait around and try to gather as much information as we used to before. It's what's called the immediate threat concept response. We have to actually go in there and stop that immediate threat. Things have changed, and officers have to act quickly, unfortunately. And now we are to 444 mass casualty shootings we've had, and we're only up to September 4th. Here we have the beginning of the school year, and this is what these poor children had to face. It really is heartbreaking.
And, we were mentioning just a moment ago that the children who were in proximity to this violence and this shooting, they not only have trauma to deal with, the horrors of what they have seen, but also they now become witnesses. Tell us about what happens for them and how their day will be today and then the days ahead from an investigation standpoint.
From an investigation standpoint, what we have is a large crime scene. And not only that actual crime scene itself, which is the school, now we have hundreds of witnesses. We have not only physical evidence, that might be anything that's found in the school. We have to go through CCTV footage, forensic evidence, that could be anything that could be drawn from cell phones, any of the, anything that was thrown or streamed online, or anything that the suspect actually might have put out. over the internet. So these investigations become very, very complex. And little by little now, are there additional, search warrants that have to be done as a result? Is the suspect, are we going to have to go back and backtrack and execute search warrants as his location? So this is something that's going to go on for days. This is not an investigation that could just be done haphazardly or in a day or two. And we talk about trauma. Remember, schemas, these are, these scars that these children are going to have to, have for the rest of their life. And this burden is going to go on. Parents are going to have to make sure that, we provide the support and counseling and the love that these children are going to need for quite a while.
Yeah, and I'm always reminded, and I was reminded in other mass shootings that I have covered, look for the helpers. And when we look at the horrors that come from a mass shooting, when we look at the horrors when bullets fly anywhere in our country, we can always look to people like you and to the people on the ground who are there helping the families. I know as we have our conversations with our kids tonight around the dinner table, that is an important quote to use, because we can look at the violence that happened, but we can also look at the response, the helpers that race to the scene. Want to also talk about the fact that we don't know much about the person who's in custody, but we can only imagine that they're going to want to now go to what car that person drove to the high school, if they drove a car there. They're going to want to go to the house where the person lived. Take us through that.
Motives are important because you know what? We're just having so many of these mass casualty shootings. We have to eventually find the root crisis. In our nation, we are suffering from mental health issues, and we're not addressing them either because we just don't have the funding or we just don't have enough personnel or medical personnel. But we're at that point that it's becoming a crisis. I don't know how it's going to get fixed, but it's got to get fixed. We just can't keep doing this anymore. At this point, the survivors of these incidents are just going to have to keep carrying this burden. And it's just something that over their lifetime, we have to be there for them. It's a horrible situation at the end of the day.
Governor of the state of Georgia has vowed that all state resources be directed to this high school, Appalachia High School, in the community of Winder, Georgia. That means that help can come not only from local law enforcement, but also state law enforcement. We also understand the FBI is a part of this. Let's talk a little bit about the interagency response there. When local, state, and federal agencies work together, that shows you it is an all-hands-on-deck situation.
It is all hands. You got to remember, a lot of smaller departments don't have the resources or sometimes, God forbid, the experience. And even in a situation like this, it's something critical that a lot of officers haven't experienced. And now, remember, think about it. These officers also have suffered a traumatic, experience that they're going to have to carry for the rest of their careers. And this might even affect the officers that responded. Also, think about the EMS personnel that are seeing things like this, the fire departments. All first responders are actually affected. And we look forward, and we need the help of, state and federal, because they do have these specialized tools. The ATF is able to quickly, ascertain the background of the firearms, which does help tremendously in the investigations, see if these firearms were purchased legally, illegally, and who we could go after in the investigation if criminal charges, need to be, brought about as a result of it. So it's important to bring in these teams and work together.
Stay with us, because I just want to update our viewers who may be logging on or tuning in to our streaming broadcast about what has happened. 10:23 a.m. Georgia time, the first calls came in from inside Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. We understood that there was a shooter and that shooter has been taken into custody. But we've also had from 2 law enforcement sources confirmation 2 are dead, 4 are wounded. Those wounded taken, some in ambulances, some in helicopters right there from the football field there outside of that high school. What we do know is that the response happened this way. Police and emergency personnel quickly came to that scene. They immediately shut down the high school, went into lockdown. They were able to make contact with that shooter and take that shooter into custody. Once that was done, the calls for help from EMS went in. And from there, they were able to get the wounded out to ambulances and onto those helicopters, while at the same time, that huge effort of getting students out to a large football field. We've seen that large football field in helicopter video in recent moments. That is the place where parents have been told they can reunify with their students. We also understand that the wounded were taken to a trauma center, and that private pickup is now available for students. Let's listen in to a young person who's now talking to one of our CBS partners.
For like 3 hours.
What went through your mind waiting out there, not knowing what was going on?
I was like a little scared. I was trying to make sure all my friends were okay because I heard like they got shot. But I mean,
We just learned from the sheriff's office that 2 people died in this and that several others were injured. When you heard that, what went through your mind?
It was sad because I know I go to school here. That could have been one of my friends I don't know of and stuff. It sucked really bad.
We hear about these happening. For this to happen at your school, it's everyone's worst nightmare.
Yeah, it really is. I thought it was just like movies and stuff like that or something. I never thought it'd be at my school.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm perfect.
Yeah. Glad to be going home.
A little bit. I wish I could have got my stuff, but it is what it is.
Thank you. Glad you're okay, and I hope all of your friends are okay too.
Me too.
Yeah. Thank you. Y'all be safe.
All right, so our local partners there are just gathering the accounts of students on the inside of that high school. That student now walking on foot to go home. Glad to be alive. And you know, when we just stop for a second, we realize, you know, it's easy for us in the news business to give you numbers and police procedure, but it's also very important that we just stop and remember that there are real people involved in this story, families who are on the run to get to the high school, students like that who are walking home shaking. Everybody involved in this story is somebody's somebody. And so our local partners there with CBS know that they are on the ground there. They are talking and getting those real life accounts. Let's go back to some of their coverage in real time.
Watching as this has developed throughout the day since this happened. Again, they said they got the call about an active shooter at this Appalachia High School around 9:30 in the morning. It's 1:30 right now, and there are still parents who are there trying to get together with their kids, hoping their kids are not one of these victims. Multiple victims involved. We do not know the names or the ages or the grades right now. One suspect is in custody. We don't know if that's a student, if this is one of their classmates, or if this is somebody random, or if this was a former student. There are a lot of questions that I know a lot of people were hoping were going to be answered in this press conference. But again, because this is such a rapidly developing situation, and because they are still finding so much evidence by the minute, he said, they weren't able to give us that much information.
Yeah, he asked for patience.
Yeah.
And I think it's understandable under the circumstances. You have to let law enforcement do its job and figure out exactly what went on. They certainly don't want to share any information that then turns out not to be accurate.
Right.
And so they did talk about another press conference coming up in about 3.5 hours, 4 p.m. It's coming up on 1:30 here. And if you're just joining us, it's been a terrible day in Barrow County at Appalachia High School, where there's been a shooting and there are multiple people who are injured. One suspect is in custody. We have law enforcement from all over the state and even federal law enforcement there on the scene, conducting an investigation into exactly what went down. You see the students there who were evacuated to the football field for safety. Right now, parents have been driving frantically to the school, to the campus. Some of them having to park, though, as far away as about a mile or so, as close as they could get. Those parents then getting out of their vehicles and on foot, walking all the way to the campus for a reunion that they are hoping and praying takes place soon with their children.
Now, we have team coverage today. We have reporters all around this school, so we know the moment there's a new development out there. One of them is Yasmina Alston. Yasmina, we understand you've just spoken with someone. What can you tell us?
Lana, I just had the chance to speak with a 15-year-old student at the high school. He had just gotten picked up from the football stadium. He was with his mom. He was with his sister. They were all understandably shaken up by what happened, but he did walk us through what happened inside of the school. He says they heard the gunshots in the classroom. He tells me that his teacher immediately closed the door, locked the door, had them hunker down. They had no idea what was happening, but he says they immediately jumped into action to get into that lockdown position. I asked him what went through his mind during that time, and his main concern was, are his friends okay? Are his classmates okay? Because there were so little answers coming into the classroom. Of course, at that time when they were still on lockdown, he was concerned about his friends. He was concerned about his classmates. He said the gunshots sounded very close to the classroom that they were in. He tells me that, you know, the entire time that they were in the football stadium waiting to get picked up and waiting to get any answers, they were sad. I mean, they were disturbed by what happened. And he says, you know, you hear about this happening in other places. He never imagined that this would be happening at his school, that this would be happening, and you know, that his classmates would have to go into a lockdown, that they would be experiencing an active shooting situation. He says it's something they've talked about in the classroom before, but never did he imagine that something like this would actually happen. He says those hours waiting in the football stadium to be picked up by his parents, he says those were some of the longest hours that he's experienced, because he just didn't know. When he heard about, you know, the 2 fatalities, he has so many questions. He wants to know, you know, who are they, and are his friends okay? Are his classmates okay? He told us that he's very happy to have the chance to go home now. His mom also, you know, very shaken up by what happened, but also relieved that she was able to get her son.
Yasmina, very quickly, can you just give us a quick look at the scene around you? We can see you're in front of the school. I can see the school sign there behind you. Are parents coming there? Is that road still blocked off? What's the scene there behind you?
Yeah, so the road is still blocked off. They're letting select people come through down this road. We've, of course, still seen a lot of law enforcement coming down here, getting closer to the high school. We're actually in front of the middle school here, and they're also on lockdown. We've had a lot of parents who've been coming here hoping to get their child, but one person did tell us that that would probably be another hour or so before they were able to get anyone out of the middle school. We have seen tons of families making this walk, many walking at least a mile to try to get as close as possible to the high school to get their children and to get their loved ones. So it is still very active over here as well, but there is a law enforcement presence at the end of the road, and they are directing who is able to come down here and get closer to the high school. And you can see off in the distance there all of the people that are
you
either
are watching
making the walk
CBS
away
News
from the school
24/7
or
continuing coverage, acquisitioning the force of our CBS partners there in Georgia to tell the story. Parents walking for a mile or more to get to their students, not knowing where their students are, the condition of their students. You also heard one student's account there saying he was glad to get the opportunity to go home. 2 students will never get that opportunity again, according to 2 law enforcement officials. 4 others are fighting for their lives in trauma center there in Georgia, just about an hour outside of Atlanta. So let's bring in former FBI Executive Assistant Director Josh School. Josh, horrible day in America. We're now seeing it once again. That high school now a crime scene.
It is a horrible day, and it's unfortunate that with every start of the school year that we are going to endure this as a society and see this happen repeatedly. It's horrible, and I feel for the families.
So as we await word on who the victims are and their individual stories, and as we await word on what no doubt first responders and trauma nurses are dealing with helping the 4 students that were taken by ambulance and by helicopter to hospitals, in your experience as a former FBI Executive Assistant Director, what is happening there on the ground with law enforcement?
So law enforcement needs to ensure that the scene is safe, first and foremost, before anything else. They need to make sure that there's no additional shooters, even though there's no reporting of an additional shooter, they still need to make sure that's happening. They want to make sure that they've recovered all of the victims. So initial reports are always wrong, and so they need to clear that school for additional threat and to make sure there's no additional victims. And while the families are walking a long distance to be reunited with their children, which is unfortunate, it is essential that law enforcement have a logical, orderly reunification policy, and that they maintain that the roads are open to get emergency personnel in and out of the scene.
I often think about families who are there at that football field at the Reunification Center, and as they watch child after child be released to the parents, you've got to think that in that crowd are the parents who belong to the students who are wounded or the people who are killed. At what point did those parents learn about the fate of their students, or will this just be a long, horrible, agonizing day waiting?
Well, as soon as they got a report that there was an active shooter at this high school, the day became agonizing for all of those parents, and it became worse for a small subset, which is really heart-wrenching. So they're going to wait way too long, and unfortunately, that is the process. With today's social media and cell phone access, undoubtedly they have identified those children and made attempts to ensure that They could meet them at the hospital, or unfortunately, the ones that look like they were life flighted out of there can meet them at the appropriate facility. I think the reporting is going to start to come out right now, and parents have been reunited, or at least been able to make contact with those that have cell phones or using their friend's cell phone.
It's just humbling and gives all of us pause to think that only weeks ago these kids were picking out school shoes with their parents. And now they're dealing with some tragically very adult things to think about. We appreciate you joining us on the stream. Stay with us. We may come back to you here in just a minute, but we do have an opportunity to go to CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff. He joins us now live from that scene. Dave, nobody better to take us through the scene and to set the scene. What are you seeing there, and what are you feeling?
Hi there, Reed. Yeah, we are just arriving here, and what else is arriving is the FBI field office from Atlanta. They've just arrived here in front of the school. It takes about an hour to get from Atlanta to here, and that is one of the bottlenecks that parents are running into. We did talk to a woman whose son was in the 10th grade hallway. He's in 12th grade, but her son was in the 10th grade hallway, and according to a neighbor, that was near the incident. So that's what we heard from the neighbor that we just talked to. So she was closer here, but she had to walk for 2.5 miles to get here. She said, if that was my son, I would have walked 10 miles to get here. And this is the situation that a lot of people are going through. People who want to get to their children are being held back because
Dave,
of the traffic.
I just want to jump in. My apologies to you. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland is stepping to the mic. We anticipate he will have something to say about this as well.
We did so because countless Americans were enduring terrible threats simply for doing their civic duty. And we did so because threats to election workers constitute threats to our democracy itself. In just a few minutes, the task force here will meet to discuss its continuing work in advance of the upcoming election. But before we begin, I want to address the tragic shooting that occurred this morning at a high school in Winder, Georgia. We are still gathering information, but the FBI and ATF are on the scene, working with state, local, and federal partners. I'm devastated for the families who have been affected by this terrible tragedy. The Justice Department stands ready to provide any resources or support that the Winder community needs in the days ahead. Before I get to the work of the task force, I also want to announce 2 major law enforcement actions that the Justice Department is taking that are separate from the important work of this task force, but are part of our broader effort to protect our elections from unlawful interference of any kind. First,
all right, so you just heard the comments of U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland about the shooting that took place in Georgia. We started our day here at CBS News 24/7 knowing he was going to step to the mic to talk about election interference by Russia. That's also very important, and we will turn that sound around for you here on CBS News 24/7 in just a little while. So while he is talking and addressing the nation about keeping our elections safe and secure, we feel it's very important to stay with that story in Georgia. Now, once again, law enforcement sources, 2 independent law enforcement sources confirmed 2 dead. We don't know if they're students or teachers or staff there at Appalachia High School, and 4 others fighting for their lives after a school shooting. The first calls came in around 9:30 a.m. Georgia time. And we have an opportunity now to go back to Dave Malkoff, CBS News' Dave Malkoff on the scene. Dave, before the Attorney General, before I interrupted you for the Attorney General's comments about this shooting, you were taking us through that bottleneck for parents to get there. You were mentioning that one parent said, hey, I had to walk miles, but I'd walk 10 miles to get to my student.
Yeah, speaking of that, it's hard for ambulances and first responders to get through here. We just seconds ago, while Merrick Garland was talking, we actually saw another medevac helicopter land here in the front of the school just behind me, possibly pick up somebody. helicopter that has gone through here. CBS News has confirmed that there are 2 people who have been killed in this shooting, at least 4 people injured. As for the parents who came running from here, Atlanta is at least an hour from here, and we talked to a woman whose next door neighbor has a son in this school behind me, and he was inside the school when the shooting happened around 9:30 this morning, and he was able to get word out to his mom, but his mom was all the way in the Atlanta area. If you're familiar with Atlanta, that's in the Alpharetta area that she was over there. It would take her forever to get here through this traffic and this lockdown. So what she did was she called her neighbor, who was about 15 minutes away. She ran about 2.5 miles to get here to hug her neighbor's child and to tell him everything's all right, your mom's on the way. And that was the moment where they connected. Then he had to go to the back of the school, Reed, where he met up with all of his fellow students who are potentially being interviewed by either GBI, which is the local version of the FBI here in Georgia. The FBI has just arrived on scene just a few minutes ago. There is state police, there is local to solve this crime that is all too familiar here in the United States, Reed.
All too familiar, and what is also becoming all too familiar is the dual experience of kids who otherwise would be learning to read and write and do arithmetic and get ready for college, and that is the fact that they are trauma victims and also crime witnesses here in these United States. Dave Malkoff with a picture of what happened there inside the high school. I'm here, my producer telling me, where are we going, Adam? We're going to go now to the coverage of our local affiliate, WANF, out of Atlanta right now, as they look at all of the students who are gathered there outside the perimeter of that high school in that reunification area.
We've seen a number of law enforcement from multiple agencies, as we've been saying, not just local, but state and federal law enforcement as well, wearing tactical gear, many of them armed. We saw a group of law enforcement officers walking to what looked like the front entryway of the building at one point early on, getting ready to enter into a building where they might not have known exactly what kind of threat they were going to face. And so the bravery on the part of these first responders, of these members of law enforcement that put their own lives on the line in order to keep us safe and our loved ones safe, it really just must be mentioned and should not go unnoticed as we see these pictures again and the students. And you can only imagine what it was like for these kids and what it will be like for these kids who were just starting a Wednesday morning at school when all of a sudden an evil thing happened, in the words of Sheriff Judd Smith of Barrow County. An evil thing when someone came in, that person in custody, we're told, and that there are multiple injuries. CBS News reporting that 2 people have died. The sheriff telling us in the brief press conference a few moments ago that they want to make sure they get this right, and that right now the priority is reuniting students with parents, or that's, I'm sorry, one of the priorities is reuniting parents and students, and that's a bit of a chaotic situation, as you can imagine. 1,900 students enrolled in the school. That's what we've been able to find out, and so that's a lot of kids and a lot of parents and loved ones who were trying to get them back together. And the sheriff asked that the media and the public be patient as they work to get more information, to conduct this investigation, to find out the answers to these questions that we all have, which of course is, who would do this? Why would they do this? Who was injured? How serious are those injuries? And if these reports turn out to be true, that there are 2 people killed, my goodness, who are they? What were they doing at the time? You know, having covered many, many school shootings, a lot of times the people who work closest to the front entryway are among the first victims because whoever it is that comes in through the front door usually comes in ready to do damage. And I remember covering this shooting in Parkland, covering the shooting at Sandy Hook years ago that it was the front office staff, the principal at Sandy Hook, who was shot and killed. Now, we don't know exactly who was injured or who might have been killed here today. I'm just saying that a lot of times it is those who work closest to the front entrance of a school when there's a shooting like this who are among the first victims.
And what a shame that we have perspective on this from other school shootings that we've had in our country. But, you know, we all know at this point, the collective, all of us know how these things go right now. There are many different scenarios that could have played out. We do not know if the suspect who is in custody was a student, or if this was a stranger, or if this was an employee, or if this was a former student. These are the questions that we are waiting for right now. Just a couple hours left until we are expected to be briefed again by law enforcement. They gave a very brief press conference and essentially said they know we are all waiting for information. We have been standing here live watching this happen with you for hours, waiting on information. Unfortunately, he says right now this scene is just so rapidly developing. He literally said they were finding new evidence by the minute. So there wasn't anything he could give us with concrete evidence that points to what happened here. So, you know, as we take a live look around the school, at one point it was very chaotic out there, and then at some point it shifted a bit to where you're seeing right now, where there wasn't a lot of commotion. Things seemed a bit calmer, albeit there's, you know, a lot of law enforcement presence still out there on the scene. But we don't know what's happening in the school right now. In the school, there are likely droves of law enforcement. GBI is on scene right now. FBI Atlanta is on scene right now. Multiple local law enforcement agencies, surrounding counties. We've had Atlanta and other cities say, hey, if you need any help, any assistance, we're here for you. Other school districts in our areas have said to parents, they put out a note saying, hey, we know you're watching this as well. We know you're wondering how safe your students are. And they assured parents that there are a lot of safety measures in place to prevent something so horrific. Unfortunately, somehow this has happened. And I think a lot of us have questions as to how.
We are also waiting to hear from the White House. We know that President Biden has been briefed on this. He has offered, of course, all federal resources to the teams on the ground. In fact, we have seen federal officers on the scene this morning wearing FBI-marked jackets. So we know that they're there, and we know that they will play a role in this investigation. We don't know which agency will take over the lead role. A lot of times that is something that is determined between the different agencies, depending on exactly what the crime is. And so we'll learn more about that, who will be the lead investigative agency here. But we are expecting to hear from President Biden, we are expecting to hear from the White House.
Yes.
We may or may not hear from the president himself, but the White House is expected to hold some type of a press briefing very soon. So, of course, we'll bring you that as well. We think about how long these investigations can take. I mean, I'll remind everybody that it was mid-July, almost 2 months ago now, when there was an assassination attempt on former President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and where one person was killed and several people were injured, including the former president himself. That investigation is still ongoing, and police have not been able to determine a motive in that case. Of course, the shooter in that instance was killed by law enforcement, snipers. So it's obviously the police were not able to talk with him to try to get more information on a potential motive. But again, it just gives you an idea of how long it takes sometimes to get concrete answers. We all want to know the answers immediately, but again, the sheriff said be patient, and that unfortunately is what we're going to have to be here because it could take a while until we learn the answers to all of the questions that we have right now.
Okay, now we're just getting some new information. As we've told you, we have many reporters on scene here and in our studio digging for answers, trying to get you the most updated information. We also have John Decker. He is here joining us with more information on the federal response. So, John, what do you know?
Well, the president has been briefed by his Homeland Security advisor. That was earlier today. We learned this through a pool report which went out about an hour or so ago. And the president is now meeting with his advisors and coordinating some sort of federal response. We also know, according to another pool report, that the vice president has also been briefed. There's no word as to whether or not the president will address the media. We know that the White House press briefing has been pushed back until after the 2 o'clock hour today, and perhaps we'll get some more information coming from the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre.
John, unfortunately, we have covered these situations too many times to count. And it is just unacceptable. And every time we hear from the president afterwards, and they talk about things that they would like to do, policies that they would like to put in place, legislation that they would like to introduce and get passed that might help to prevent something like this from happening again. But the sad reality is that no president has been able to come up with any kind of a magic solution to this. It just keeps happening, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House.
You're absolutely right about that. I remember being in the White House and having President Obama come out to address the press in the White House press briefing room after that shooting that occurred at Sandy Hook in Connecticut. And I thought, personally, that was the tipping point. That was the tipping point for having Congress come forward with some meaningful legislation or policy proposals that would certainly decrease the amount of these types of episodes from happening in the future. And it didn't happen then, and it hasn't happened since. And I think that's the really frustrating thing for any leader, whether you're talking about a Democrat like President Barack Obama, a Republican like President Trump in the last administration, or President Biden right now. We are likely to hear from the vice president a little bit later today. She's in New Hampshire today campaigning, but I am certain that she will address reporters, talk to reporters about what happened in Georgia earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to inject politics into this,
Right.
but obviously there is an election coming up, and we have two candidates who are running to be the next president of the United States. I would think that they would have to say something, right?
Well, certainly you would expect that from our leaders. And as it relates to the two candidates, I mentioned what the vice president is doing today, and I would certainly expect her to talk about this terrible tragedy happening earlier today, another one in Georgia.
John Decker, our White House correspondent.
A town hall prepared that will take place this evening in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's with Fox News, and certainly I would expect the interviewer there, the moderator of that event, Sean Hannity, to ask about that, if not having a question posed to the former president by those in the audience in Pennsylvania.
Former President Trump was in office when the shooting in Parkland took place. And that was another scenario where you thought maybe something will be done. And in fact, there was some legislation that came from that awful tragedy. And former President Trump did hold, I remember, several meetings with the victims and different stakeholders in the Parkland shooting at the White House. And then something happened, right?
Well, yes,
right.
something did
We are
happen
on national broadcast here at CBS News 24/7, but as we say all the time, all stories are local stories. You've been listening to local coverage out of Atlanta with our CBS partners. Once again, a shooting at a high school not long after class went into session today. Multiple law enforcement sources now reporting 2 dead, multiple injured in that shooting in Widener, Georgia, about an hour outside of Atlanta. You heard them talking about policy and policy questions. Let's take it now back to the people. There are young people who are traumatized once again in these United States. There are parents who are traumatized, who are on the way, some of them walking miles to get to their students, who are right now corralled in a reunification center. There are first responders in hospitals. You are looking live at one of those hospitals. This is Grady Hospital. That is a trauma center, and that is where ambulance after ambulance and helicopter after helicopter transported those who were shot today on what was supposed to be a school day. Keep it here on CBS News 24/7, where we will continue to report what we do know. We'll continue getting answers to what we do not know, and we'll continue to try to find answers to what we should know.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zach.
And I'm Errol Barnett. We continue to follow breaking news out of Georgia. CBS News has learned that at least 2 people are dead and as many as 4 people have been injured.
Police say a suspect is in custody after shots were fired at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. That's roughly 50 miles northeast of Atlanta.
Now, the FBI's Atlanta field office is there on the scene, assisting with what now is an investigation. And officials say it will take days, though, to uncover exactly what happened there in Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp has also directed all available state resources to respond to this. The Barrow County Sheriff held a news conference earlier and said this investigation is just beginning. He's asking people to be patient.
This is a very, very fluid investigation. It's very early. And I have asked the assistance of the GBI and the agencies here behind me today, and there are multiple agencies that responded this morning to help us and help the Sheriff's Office. We do have a suspect in custody, and we are asking for your patience as the media to please let us get the facts that we need to make sure we get this right.
One 10th grader described what happened after hearing shots fired while sitting in a classroom.
I was in class and we heard shots. The teacher ran, slammed the door, made us all go in the corner. We heard like the teachers and everything in the hallways, the police. We heard like the shooting, and then we heard that they ran away. And then after a while, they came and took us out to the football field.
CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff is there on the scene. You see him in Winder, Georgia. David, as we heard from Aiden Navarro, he also explained that he had to leave all of his stuff behind. So all of his possessions are back there on campus. There's this scramble for parents to reunite with their kids. What are you seeing?
Hello, Errol. Hello, Lana. It is really difficult for parents to get to this scene because the entire area is locked down, and not only that, but they also have cars. Sorry, there was someone walking by. They also have cars that are packed up all over the street, and it's hard to get by those cars. So we did talk to a woman who came running because her neighbor's son was in there. He's in 12th grade, and his mother couldn't get here. She is an hour away in the Atlanta area, so she came running. She said she had to run for 2.5 miles through all those cars to get here, but that's what a lot of parents are doing. They are just abandoning their cars by the side of the street and running in here. The FBI has arrived on scene just a few minutes ago. We did see lots of school buses arrive. Those students were staged out behind me on the football field while they were assessing the situation inside.
Dave, I'm not sure if we still have you. Did we lose you, Dave?
Can you hear me still?
Yes, we got you back. Please continue.
Okay, so there's, I was saying there's multiple law enforcement agencies here, all the way from the FBI to the GBI to Sheriff's Department, and also local law enforcement from all over that are trying to assess the situation. We have a State Patrol car going behind us right now. We have seen at least 2 medevac helicopters come from this school. CBS News has confirmed that there are 2 people who were killed in this shooting. My colleague Mark Strassman just talked to a student who had gone through this drill over and over again. Students here in Georgia, I have kids in Georgia schools in APS, and they go through these drills as young as elementary school. And at the very beginning of this situation, they thought it was a drill, but the teachers told them that this is actually the real thing, and they were really panicked the way that you could imagine that students would be. They tried to call out to their parents. Some students were able to get a phone call out to their parents and have anybody come here and actually put eyes on them, give them a hug, tell them that everything's all right. But right now,
Dave, unfortunately, it seems like your microphone continues to go out. If you have us back, when we were hearing from you before, we were hearing that some school buses were leaving. Do you know anything more about efforts to reunite families, parents with their children? Are there still a lot of children, or sorry, they're high schoolers? Are there still a lot of high schoolers that are there on the football field waiting to go home at this point, or have they mostly dissipated?
Lana, those reunions are happening right now. They are able to one by one have the students come out of that lockdown area in the back of the high school at the football field, have them come up and reunite with their parents, who are both in tears and both very emotional about what happened today. It happened about 9:30, and some of the students actually thought this was a drill, but it was the real thing. And we do have parents reuniting with their kids. 2 school buses. I see another one coming down here. Not sure if anybody's on there, but the 2 school buses did come through here empty, waiting to pick up kids. And as we see, if we just hang on here for a second, we can see if there is anybody on this school bus that's coming through. It doesn't appear that any students the way that they would be able to take some of the kids back from this tragic situation back to a place that they call home, that they can feel safe and feel that they are in some sort of reunion with their families, with something that is safe and normal and comfortable for them after this day, which is a day they prepare for, but a day they hoped would never come. But unfortunately, here at Appalachia High School, it came for them at 9:30 a.m. this morning.
So unnerving for so many people. Dave Malkoff, thank you very much. We want to bring in Catherine Schweit now. She's an author and former FBI agent and attorney. What's interesting, Catherine, is that, you know, parents are going through such a horrific situation today at that school, trying to find their kids, the students, but other parents worry about their own kids at school, wondering when something like this might happen to them. What are the first steps here as far as the guidance parents should give their kids about things like this?
I'm glad you asked me that, because there's so many facts we don't know right now, right? But what we do know is how we can help people in the future and the panicked parents right now. After the Sandy Hook massacre, I was asked to put together a program for the FBI, including and working with the other federal agencies to look at how can we prepare people. We don't have to like that the shootings happen. We just have to be prepared in case they do, just like a car accident, right? Put a seatbelt on. In this case, we want parents to know that they should ask what kind of training their kids have. They should ask the school before the school year starts or at their first meeting, when should I go to the school? Where should I go? What is the plan to reunite us if there is an emergency? Because it also could be a tornado, right? Or a hurricane or some sort of storm in Georgia. So you should know what the emergency plans are and then talk to your kids about it. I think that's the most important thing, so that they're not making up the decision about what to do and how to catch you.
Catherine, you heard Dave saying that for a lot of these students, they have been through these training exercises year after year after year, starting in elementary school, and that many of them just thought that this was another back to school and we'll do an active shooter drill again. How concerned are you that for kids this becomes rote? Because I remember doing fire drills and not everybody in my class was really paying attention to the fire drill at that point. As we practice this, it's really important because it happens, but then it becomes so normalized in a way that it doesn't maybe have the same importance when it does happen.
You know, I like that you say that, because, you know, we haven't lost a child to a school fire since the 1950s in Chicago, but we still run the fire drills. And it is a sense of normalization so that it doesn't raise your level to hysteria every time. And I don't like that we have school shootings, but the idea of being prepared is being ready to respond and then to be able to bring calm back into your life. So the reality is that even though I will say that of the shootings that we have in the United States, these types of shootings are less than 1/100% of all shootings, right? It's a very infinitesimal amount of shootings that we have, but they of course get outsized news coverage. Everybody panics, you know, and then you have a school of 2,000 kids like this, and everyone says, we had a shooting in my school, even though they might not have been near it. And I'll say this, that if they had a shooting 3 blocks from their house, they might not think they had a shooting nearby. So it's perspective, and we do get a lot of coverage about it. So we do have to recognize that as long as we have guns in America and as long as we have gun deaths in America, we're going to have to prepare people for that, just like we do for tornadoes and fires.
And despite this being statistically rare, it still speaks to how traumatized Americans are when balloons pop in a mall and all of a sudden people rush for the exits, or people assume in a lot of public situations there's a shooting when there isn't. In this instance, though, a suspect is in custody. You know, who knows what information may come of it, but how do officials continue to develop programs that prevent this type of thing from happening?
Well, I think that we develop them, you know, as a whole, making sure that we take one piece at a time. I hear a lot of times, as you can imagine, since I work only in this area, I hear, oh, it's not the guns, it's mental health. It's not mental health, it's the guns. You know what? It's all of that. We wouldn't have this situation in the country if we didn't have the volume of guns. But that doesn't mean that that, the guns are just the solution or mental health is just the solution. So I think what we're doing is we're working on piecing it together to say, when do we have an issue? For instance, the 18 to 21-year-olds who are firearms purchasers. There was a law change to allow for the FBI to do a little bit of longer time for background checks, and that has kept guns out of the hands of instant purchases of 18 or 19-year-olds who wanted to buy semi-automatic rifles. That's, in my opinion, kind of a good thing, but there are lots of good things. In addition to, I'll say this, with people, you have kids in your household, parent who has kids in their household, talk to your teenagers about it, because I'll tell you what I hear most. FBI research shows that in the active shooter situations of the FBI research of 60-some shooters, 92% of the school shooters told another school student about the shooting, and that student, for some reason, didn't tell other people. 92%. Teachers, 70 and 80%, knew and had information about behavioral cues. It's easy in retrospect, but we also need to be prepared about how to look for the behavioral concerns. Is a child stopping taking their medication? Are they feeling despondent? Did they have a breakup with somebody? Are their parents in the middle of a divorce or a bankruptcy? Has that child been asking for care? Are their grades dropping? There are lots of signs. So when you feel, and you're as a parent or a child, when you feel there's someone around you who is not functioning the way they should, think about that. And remember that snitching is getting somebody in trouble. Telling is getting somebody help.
Catherine, that was such a powerful statistic. 92% of these types of shooters actually told someone else in advance. And Errol and I have been having conversations with people all morning about what we should be telling our kids in terms of how to hide and fight and run, and the latest guidance on school safety in the case of an active shooter. And I'm now thinking about what you said in terms of making sure that our kids know that if someone tells you about things that are concerning, that they need to share that also with a trusted adult. But as we're talking about the different things that we should be discussing with our children, and you're talking about how much more traumatizing a school shooting is, because for all of the students, and there's, I think, a little bit less than 2,000 who are at this particular school or in this system. So they are feeling traumatized by this event. How should we be discussing that with our children and helping them through, whether it is having been part of a community that is dealing with it, or just seeing this on the news as they are in the beginning of a new school year? What's your advice?
I think it's very important that parents don't leave their television on and oversaturate a child. Imagine if you were trying to have this conversation. If we were having this conversation because a child's grandfather had died, or their father had died in an accident, or their mother had died of a particular cancer or something. You still have to have the conversations that are tough conversations with kids, but you do it at the level of that child. So don't oversaturate them on the news. That's super important. Even if you're from this community and this family and you feel like you need to leave the television on, leave it on in your bedroom. Don't leave it on in front of the child, because they can't comprehend and absorb all of that and find some normalization in their world. I think that's the first thing about the television and the media saturation. The phones, shutting the apps off, getting them outside so that they're not on the phone all the time. Whatever that is, make up something to do with them, make them help you make dinner tonight or do the laundry. So I think that's important. And then also remember that you're the one who knows your child the best. You are the one who can have the best conversations with your child or your friends or your neighbors. Have the people who know your child the best, have conversations with them so that they have somebody who's a trusted adult to have conversations with and work through what their particular issues are. And then, of course, know that there are county mental health facilities available, available there. And the schools will have counselors available. Avail yourselves of them for you or your children, and not just the high school children, all the way down.
Catherine, that's such good advice, and it's really insightful into what to protect your kids from, right? Don't oversaturate them with coverage, but also the tools to give them should something like this happen. Based on everything you've just laid out, then, I understand that from a lot of psychologists, keeping up your regular routine is important, even if you've experienced trauma. A student may come home today and say, you know, Mom and Dad, I don't want to go back to that place where people were killed, you know, Thursday and Friday or next week. What would be your advice? To continue the regular routine and go back to school tomorrow, or to take some time?
You know, I'm not a child psychologist, but you know, as they say, I play one on TV. I work with a lot of the people like that and who work in this area, and they all advise routine. Remember that routine is what we are comforted with. You know, when we go to somebody's house who we know, we already know what to expect. So even going to school, they're going to see the people who they know that maybe they left in a trauma situation at school, and they maybe talked to some people on their cell phone or over the phone or texted back and forth. But when they go back to school, they're going to see the people who they know, who are their comfort level, the teachers who they know, who know how to deal with them on a daily basis. Routine is very important when you're trying to recover from trauma, because it gives you things to not have to overanalyze and whether that's a good idea or not. If you move them someplace, right? If you drop them out of school, they lose every sense of normalcy in their life at a time when they don't have any choices about the things that are abnormal.
And important to watch your child for all those cues, because every child is obviously different. Really appreciate having your experience and your insight into all this. Want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the investigation that's now unfolding. So we know local police are on the scene. FBI is coordinated with them. The governor has pledged all necessary support. The White House says that they are watching as well. A suspect is in custody. What happens now?
Yeah, now it's calm to chaos, right? We've got the chaos. We're bringing it to calm. All law enforcement, you know, knows how to do this, knows what to do whenever there is a situation where you have, you know, a massive, essentially a potential mass casualty, whether it's, like I said, a hurricane or a shooting. You know that what you want to do is determine the area that you have to be responsible for. Then you just parse out the responsibilities. Somebody will do the search. If there were lots of rounds discharged, the FBI, that might be a thing that the FBI does. They bring their evidence teams in and they do the search because they can, and it's easy for them. They have big teams that do it. And then they hand that information over to the investigative agency, in this case, the Bureau. So, and there'll also be an investigation. Somebody will be assigned to make sure all the interviews are done. Somebody will be assigned to make sure that, and that may be, somebody may be a different agency, for example. The prosecutor's office there'll be warrants that we will want to obtain for the suspect's house, for the suspect's vehicle, if the suspect has a vehicle, and any other location that might be familiar, you know, from interviews on whether or not that suspect had access to it, including phones, accessing phones and accessing email addresses. So that's all a process that just needs to take time. But we've done it before. We all know how to do it. And the chief investigative agency will work with all the other agencies to collect the evidence, do the interviews, and then draw a timeline back as far as they can on the suspect to determine when did he begin on this pathway to violence and what kinds of things, you know, could we have done to intercede. And that's how we learn every time a shooting occurs, how to potentially help prevent the next one.
Well, we so appreciate you speaking with us. We do want to bring in this detail we've just learned, which is that there are now 4 confirmed deaths from this shooting at this high school in Georgia. We know that you've helped create the FBI's active shooter program. We now see Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, taking the podium. We want to listen into that.
So this week, kids across the country are heading back to school for the new school year. Today is supposed to be an exciting day for students and parents, but instead, we're seeing yet another horrific shooting. Now, as a parent myself, I know the anxiety that comes with sending your kid out into the world every day, living with the real fear of the worst can happen. So please know that our hearts are with those families in Winder, Georgia, who are forced to face this act of senseless violence. I want to let you know that the President and the Vice President have both been briefed, and his administration will continue coordinating with federal, state, and local officials as we receive more information. We're grateful for the brave first responders who are on the scene, and we stand ready to provide support as needed. As the President has said time and time again, this is not normal. This is not normal. Students and teachers deserve to know that their schools are safe. They should focus on learning, not lockdowns. While the President and Vice President have taken historic action to reduce gun violence, more must be done to keep our schools and communities safe. We continue to call on Congress to do something, We need universal background checks. We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, require safe storage of firearms, invest in violence prevention programs, and pass a national red flag law. Enough is enough, and I cannot say this enough, which is enough is enough. We cannot allow this to happen in our communities. We cannot allow this to happen in our schools. So we have to do everything that we can to keep our children safe, to keep the people who are supposed to protect our children, who are they supposed to learn from, safe. And enough is enough. Congress needs to act. Now, turning to my colleague from NSC, who's here to discuss the latest Biden-Harris administration actions today against foreign actors attempting to covertly influence our elections and undermine confidence in our democratic institution. Admiral John Kirby will discuss the coordinated actions we are taking in addition to other foreign policy news of the day. Admiral?
Thank you, Colonel. Good afternoon, everybody. I think as you saw today, the Department of Justice, Department of Treasury, and the State Department took a series of coordinated actions against foreign actors associated with the Russian government who are attempting to covertly influence our elections. Specifically, all these federal agencies revealed activities directed and funded by RT, formerly known as Russia Today, to covertly spread Russian government propaganda with the aim of reducing international support for Ukraine, bolstering pro-Russian policies and interests, and influencing voters here in the U.S. And in foreign elections as well. RT is no longer just a propaganda arm of the Kremlin. It is being used to advance covert Russian influence actions. Additionally, the Russian government is laundering influence and information operations through Kremlin-controlled commercial firms, such as the Social Design Agency, that work extensively at the direction and control of the Russian Federation. All of this activity was designed to funnel disinformation through outlets and social media influencers that a certain number of Americans find credible. We will not stand for that. So in addition to the law enforcement actions that were announced just a little bit ago by the Attorney General, the State Department announced a new policy to restrict visas for employees of Kremlin-supported media organizations that are affiliated with these covert activities. And they released a $10 million reward for justice for individuals associated with a Russian hacking group that's named Russian Angry Hackers Did It, or RADIT for short, as it's also known. The State Department also designated 6 RT-affiliated entities as foreign missions, a designation that now requires them to report information about their personnel and their property to the United States government. For their part, the Treasury Department is sanctioning 6 executives and officials affiliated with RT, 3 executives associated with other Kremlin-controlled organizations. And additionally, the Treasury Department is designating ANO Dialogue, a Russian government-founded nonprofit that uses artificial intelligence to create and distribute online Russian disinformation for use against election campaigns. The Treasury included ANO Dialogue's subsidiary and its executive officer in its sanctions as well. Now, Russia, of course, is not alone in its desire to destabilize our democracy. As you may recall, just last month, the United States government disclosed that Iran engaged in a series of cyber actions with the intent to gain access to the private communications of former President Trump and his campaign by way of associated political advisors. Those efforts were clearly intended to denigrate former President Trump and to compromise his political campaign. We made it clear then, and we make it clear again today, that this is unacceptable, and we won't stand for it either. Let me close with just two more thoughts, if I could. First and most importantly, we are committed to protecting our democracy and our elections, regardless of the source or the target trying to interfere with them. As today's actions make clear, we have the ability to monitor these threats, to thwart them, to identify the actors involved, and to hold the actors involved accountable. We will continue to do so. These actions are the result of months of hard investigative and interagency cooperation, and we're grateful for the law enforcement, diplomatic, intelligence, and Treasury professionals who brought it all together. They put the interest of the American people first, right where it belongs. That brings me to my second point. The hard work now must continue. No resting, no waiting, no backing off. The American people can rest assured that the men and women of the federal government are at this very moment laboring to prevent future abuses and interference in our electoral process. But this cannot alone be the work of government. Every citizen bears a hand. We urge all Americans to read through the indictment today. Study the sanctions and the designations that we announced. All of it's online. All of it is readily available to you. Likewise, please take time to consider how you get your news and information. It can be difficult, of course, to be absolutely certain of its authenticity, especially given the covert tactics of groups like RT. But with time, some patience, and a firm reliance on credible and established media outlets, that uncertainty can be greatly reduced. As President Biden has said, democracy can at times be fragile, but it is also inherently resilient. We all need to work together as Americans to ensure that resilience. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. First on this disinformation campaign, can you talk a little bit more about why unveiling this now? And secondly, is this just, do you see this as just the tip of the sword? Is there more out there? And the why now question is basically, I think, in some ways, a lot of Americans would say about Russian disinformation, not surprising. And may, in some ways, question why is the administration doing this so close to the election? And I may be answering my own question a little bit here, but if you could just talk to the timing. And then secondly, has there been any more meetings with senior officials and Israelis today regarding the ceasefire or the situation on the Israel-Lebanon border?
Okay, there's a lot there. On the why now, and I think the Attorney General talked about this. I mean, the actions that they announced today, and of course it was coordinated with the announcements by State and Treasury, all really reflected where they were in the investigative process. And as the Attorney General said, Amr, it's still an ongoing investigation, so I wouldn't rule out anything in terms of any future actions that might be taken. Depends on where this investigation takes us. So the why now was really driven by the progress of the investigation, the certainty they had in what they had uncovered, and the ability that they believe they had to take the actions in a way that were commensurate with the goals of the investigation. So it was all really timed to the investigation, that's all. And you asked for tip of the spear, but let me go back to, you also said people are maybe shrugging about this because, well, it's just, you know, but that's, I mean, obviously people can have their own views about whether they're surprised or not that Russia might be trying to interfere in our election, but we're not taking it lightly. Nobody's shrugging here because it's that important. It's that important to convey to the American people that we are taking the safety and security of our electoral process seriously. So nobody's shrugging about it, and we're going to constantly monitor, as I said, these threats, be able to thwart them when we see them, and identify and hold the actors accountable. On your second question about the ceasefire talks, I have no additional specific meetings to talk about today, except that even today, we are in touch with our counterparts in Qatar, in Israel, and certainly in Egypt about trying to see if we can get a proposal that can be finally culminated and a ceasefire deal can be achieved. So those conversations are active even today.
There was a report that Jake Hochstein and Brett McGurk had a virtual meeting today with Dermer and I think some other Israeli officials. Is that not true?
I won't confirm any specific individual sessions except to tell you that even today there have been ongoing conversations with our counterparts, as you would expect there would be. So even though there's not Teams meeting in Doha or Cairo right now, it's not like the effort has lapsed.
Thanks, Karine. Thanks, Admiral. On the Russian interference, is there any indication of at what level this is being apparently approved in Russia? Does this go? I mean, does this go up to Putin's level, for example? And secondly, is there any sign of the this disinformation favouring one or other of the candidates in the U.S. election?
We believe Mr. Putin is winning of these actions. As for your second question, I think, look, in Iran's case, it was very clear. As I mentioned in my opening statement, and I think the Attorney General did too, very clear that they were trying to denigrate former President Trump and involve themselves in his campaign to their detriment. I would say, though, what we talked about in Russia, they are certainly trying to sow discord, feed disinformation, and try to put narratives out there through voices that the American people might find credible that support their policies, that support their interests, such as trying to diminish support in Ukraine. So it's very consistent with what we've seen Mr. Putin do in the past.
Thanks, Karine. Thanks, Admiral. So as you alluded to, we've been here before, and after 2020, the administration imposed sweeping sanctions and also took efforts to prevent this sort of behavior. So why are we here again? And what about today's actions will deter future disinformation?
We're here again because actors like Iran and Russia are at it again and continue to believe that it somehow suits their interest to interfere in our electoral process. So we're here because of what they've been doing, and that we're trying to hold them accountable and to make it harder for them to do this. And that's exactly what the actions today, and I'm sure actions to come, as appropriate, will do. Will make it harder for them. Will it make it completely impossible? Probably not, because they'll find workarounds. I mean, these are actors, in this case driven by the Kremlin itself, that are bound and determined to try to change and influence the way Americans vote when they go in that ballot box. And that's why I said it at the end of my opening statement. Everybody, not just the federal government, but everybody needs to be concerned about this. And everybody needs to bear a hand in pushing back on the influence attempts by Russia.
And then on Israel, we asked Karine, not me, I wasn't here yesterday, but my colleagues asked Karine in many different ways about the president's recent comments with regard to Netanyahu not doing enough to secure a ceasefire deal. So my question is whether he has directly expressed that himself to Netanyahu, that he is not doing enough.
I would say that the conversations with the Prime Minister every time they occur are very direct and very forthright. These are two guys that know each other well, and the president, he makes his concerns very plainly known. But for all the things that those two gents may not agree on politically, and maybe not even completely agree on in the conduct of the war, they do agree on the central tenet that Israel needs to be defended, that the Israeli people shouldn't have to live next door to that kind of a threat, and that the United States, and President Biden specifically, is going to continue to stand with Israel as they defend themselves against this threat, and to do everything that we can to try to bring this conflict to a close.
And then one quick one, just for clarification, because a lot continues to happen on this front. When the president is calling for a ceasefire, does he mean a permanent ceasefire at this point, or does he mean one long enough to allow the hostages to be released?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I mean, the ceasefire that we're really trying to drive out right now is getting to phase one, which gets you 6 weeks of no fighting. 6 weeks of no fighting, and that means more humanitarian assistance, and then getting at least the first tranche of hostages out, the ones that are at the most risk, elderly, sick, women in particular. But if you can get through phase one, because once you get into phase one, and that's the goal, just let us get to phase one right now, then you can start building towards phase two. And if you can get to phase two, you can get both sides to phase two, well, then you're talking about a real potential end to the hostilities in general, which of course will be a general ceasefire. So what we're focused on right now is phase one. That's a 6-week ceasefire.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, appreciate it. Taking a step back, just to follow up there, has the message from...
All right, well, we've been listening to the White House press briefing. It started with White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. And as you see now, she was joined by John Kirby, the White House National Security Communications Advisor. They've been speaking with reporters. Jean-Pierre said that our hearts are with those in Winder, Georgia. and that both the president and vice president were briefed on the situation there. She continued saying that students should be, quote, focused on learning, not lockdowns. The press secretary also called on Congress to take some specific action, including banning assault and high-capacity magazines, safe storage, universal background checks, and a national red flag law.
And we also, during the briefing, received a statement from President Biden. He alluded to some of the same language that the press secretary used and said that students across the country should learn how to, are learning how to duck and cover rather than learning how to read and write. He's pointing to some of the initiatives he's taking, but they are pushing for more to be done to protect people. We also heard Kirby there address the U.S. accusing Russia of interfering with the 2024 presidential election, which is underway. And he says Russian operations included buying ads on social media, using content generated by AI, and that the investigation into all of that is ongoing. We'll continue to listen in and bring you any updates from the White House. For now, though, we want to continue coverage of the shooting out of Georgia. We're joined by Anna Schechter, who's a senior producer for Crime and Public Safety. And Anna, by now we know that at least 4 people have been killed, several others injured, and a suspect in custody. What are you learning that will help us understand what unfolded this morning?
Well, at least 9 people have been transported to local hospitals, one of them via helicopter, just to give you a sense of the scene and the chaos. There were multiple ambulances that rushed to the scene. This was all following the initial 10:23 a.m. call to local law enforcement. There are multiple agencies involved, including the FBI. Now we are looking to learn more about the profile of the shooter. That's, of course, of interest. Were there red flags? Were there mental health issues? We've spoken about this before. And, of course, we're talking about these victims, at least 4 dead. So that is technically, according to the FBI's definition, a mass shooting. So we have reached that number. And the investigation is ongoing. You saw during the presser earlier today, the sheriff was not wanting to give too many details because these numbers keep changing and he doesn't want to give incorrect information. So right now what we know is at least 4 dead, at least 9 carried away to hospitals, and we will continue to update as we get more information.
And Anna, you have been also following what people are saying online, and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Can you help us to separate fact from fiction?
Absolutely. There were earlier reports that the suspect was neutralized. Those reports are false.
Neutralized meaning killed.
Killed, exactly. Those reports were false. There is 1 suspect in custody. We don't know about accomplices. We don't know about red flags. If other people knew the individual had a gun and was planning to carry out this attack. At this time, we don't have that information, but there are also photos of an apparent shooter that are actually fake photos taken from other scenarios that are being circulated online. And we see this time and time again after a big event. People take to social media, posting conspiracy theories, posting fake photos. We know what you can do with AI, and so we're being very careful to just put out verified information.
And how interesting that we hear from the White House a discussion on misinformation as it relates to the election as we experience this mass shooting where there's misinformation about possibly the suspects and what's happened. So important to stay close to you and your team and to CBS News to learn the latest on this. But it is the beginning, generally speaking, of the school year for so many people. And we've been here too many times before. But isn't this a time of heightened risk of this type of thing, because those, if this was a student, sometimes feel bullied and see the beginning of school as some type of opportunity?
That is very possible, and that's exactly the question that investigators are asking, looking for a motive, looking for red flags. We've seen other cases where parents have been questioned about their child, and not to make any connections with this individual, but other parents have even been charged. In the Michigan case, the Michigan school shooter, the parents were actually initially charged. And so that is a tactic that prosecutors are looking at where there are red flag laws. So in this case, we don't have that information, but the points you raised are absolutely questions that investigators are asking.
And just to clarify, the White House, again, using this to push for national red flag laws. What are they exactly, and how might they help in a scenario where a student has told people or warned them that they might be planning something like this?
In most cases, the perpetrator of a mass shooting or a school shooting told another student, told another person, posted something online, whether it's a manifesto or an intent or violent rhetoric online, and had people paid attention and taken it seriously earlier, an attack could have been thwarted in many, many cases, in the majority of cases. And so this is the Biden administration effort to try to counteract that. The red flag laws would be if there's a documented mental health case, an issue, a threat, that a whole system kicks in to try to prevent this kind of tragedy being carried out. And that pertains to obtaining guns, being able to keep guns, and also support for people. It's to offer support to people who are struggling. Oftentimes, perpetrators feel isolated. They're going through a traumatic time, or their parents are, divorce, bankruptcy, stress in a family unit. And so these kinds of laws would look at that and address those red flags.
And it is worth noting that Georgia is not one of the states. The 21 states have adopted some level of red flag laws.
Georgia is not
one of them. Their neighbor, Florida, however, does have those red flag laws. And as you were talking about this, I thought it was an interesting point, too, that this was also to help protect the individual as well. In Indiana, for example, after they instituted this red flag law, there was a 7.5% drop in gun suicide rates. And so for lots of reasons, there are Republican and Democrats who are proponents of these red flag laws, but they do not. That doesn't exist currently in Georgia. What are some of the other aspects of trying to make progress? Because as you mentioned, the idea of prosecutors now going after parents who have provided guns.
That's one tactic.
That's one thing. These red flag laws, we heard Karine Jean-Pierre lay out 4 different items that the White House was interested in seeing lawmakers do. But we know that more and more the progress is actually not happening at a federal level. It's happening at a state level. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. But going back to the federal level, just yesterday we heard a presser where federal officials are instituting gun trafficking laws to prevent guns to be transported over state lines. And they actually filed charges against 3 gun retailers who had engaged in this practice of transporting guns across state lands. You can't do that because state by state, that's part of the problem. There's a patchwork of laws. And so some states, even a state like Illinois, has pretty strict gun laws, but then Indiana has loose gun laws. In fact, a majority of the guns used in Chicago gun crime, deadly shootings, come from outside of Illinois, many from Indiana, some from Missouri. So state by state, states are increasingly instituting preventative laws, but there are outliers also that just want to make it as easy as possible for people who enjoy guns for sport to not have any restrictions placed on them. And that's really a problem because the gun lobby can be very strong. If you look at Oklahoma, Ohio, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, it's tough.
But it's a good note that things can be done. Laws have been passed, but it's the patchwork of states that makes it a challenge, which then puts the pressure on the federal government to do more. Anna Schechter, thanks so much. We know we'll have more of your reporting on CBS platforms throughout the day. Thank you.
And our coverage of this story will continue right here on CBS News 24/7. After a short break, we're going to speak with a former top police official for a look at the early stages of this investigation.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
Exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. We have updates for you on the story that we continue to cover out of Winder, Georgia. 4 people are dead. At least 9 others have reported injuries and have been taken to hospitals in the area after a shooting at a high school there. The suspect, at least one suspect, is in police custody, is also alive after some other reports to the contrary after the shooting in Appalachia High School. We have continuing coverage as we bring you all of the latest news.
Joining us now is Rodney Harrison. He's the former Suffolk County, New York Police Commissioner, and he's a CBS News law enforcement contributor. Rodney, what goes through your mind on a day like today, and when you see how things unfolded, how quickly the FBI was on the scene, and how quickly the governor also said he's making resources available? What does this look like from your point of view?
Well, I'm concerned. You have to take a deeper dive into the subject involved and find out a little bit more into what was the motive that caused him to go into the schools and commit this act of violence. Was he a lone wolf? Was he part of a group? Is this something where we have to worry about surrounding schools and make sure those schools are evacuated as well? How did he come into the possession of his firearm? What's the makeup of his family? So there's a lot of work that the FBI and the local law enforcement need to do into looking into our subject involved and what was the motive to make sure that there's not any other incidents that could possibly happen out in that community.
The Georgia Bureau of Investigations has just put out a note that reports of additional shootings at nearby schools are false. As a former police commissioner, what do you make of people spreading misinformation about this? How are local and state authorities, not to mention the federal authorities that are assisting, trying to manage the situation right now?
So that's where the need of a priority of a press conference comes into play, so you can de-escalate any fears that are being put out there from other people on social media. I think it's important that the chief of police or the director of the FBI in that area get in front of some microphones, tell them exactly what's going on. We're hearing at this time that the subject is in custody, but we still need a lot more information. And once again, in fairness to them, there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. But the important thing is, what are you doing to de-escalate the situation to the surrounding residents that are inside of that community?
Considering that the suspect and the interview with the suspect will be crucial in understanding a motive, so too will it be important to speak to other students and witnesses and teachers from the school. At this moment, everyone is kind of just trying to get safe. Parents we saw abandoning their cars near the school so they can run to campus and just wrap their arms around their kids. How then do police get to interview witnesses? When does that happen? And what's your advice for parents who might just be shielding their child today and not wanting them to be back on campus tomorrow?
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of different analysts making suggestions what need to be done. You know, we're sitting here and suggesting that the subject involved might have been a student. Was he somebody that graduated from that high school? Was he somebody that was bullied from somebody within that institution? So there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered. But I will say this: it's important for people that have any information about this shooter to feel comfortable to come forward and make sure they share any intelligence that they have to the law enforcement officials. That's going to help out with the investigation. That's going to help the investigators get down to the bottom of it to make sure that there are not any other threats that are going on within that area.
Ronnie, I'm still floored by the statistic that more than 90% of these types of shootings were reported to somebody else. The shooter told someone else before this happened. In your previous experience, does that information often make it to law enforcement authorities?
You know, it's hard to put a statistical number on how many times information has gotten to law enforcement officials. I will say this, Anna shared a little bit about the red flag laws, and we had a lot of success in Suffolk County regarding recovering guns from residents of people who were homeowners that had guns because somebody in that family was going through some type of mental concern, illness, and made some type of threat that they're going to harm either themselves or somebody else. This is something that the federal government needs to take a deeper dive at and take a closer look at and make sure you're holding law enforcement departments accountable to put these red flag laws in place, because you will see a level of success of getting guns out of situations that should not be in a wrong household.
It's a good point you make, because while we know it's a high number of school shootings in which somebody was told, somebody was warned, it's hard to gauge how many times someone was warned and they intervened and prevented a school shooting. Can you think of a situation in which a tip from a relative or a fellow student or someone else in the community actually made a major difference?
Oh, a couple of times. You know, once again, I did 32 years in law enforcement, and I've had multiple incidents where people have shared information to their school safety officer, saying that, hey, listen, this individual here made threats that he was going to bring up a gun, and that got the ball rolling into conducting a deeper investigation into that person and retrieving that gun from that person's residence. Once again, it's this. Sometimes the student may not be the gun owner. It may be another family member that's underneath that roof that may be a gun owner, that we have to go in there and retrieve that firearm before a disaster occurs. So it's important for people to come forward before incidents like this occurs. Not to say that there were any mistakes here that might have happened, but it takes a lot of different people involved, administrators, teachers, anybody, that if they hear something, they need to share it with some type of law enforcement official so we can intervene and possibly stop or interdict another shooting incident like this one.
And Rodney, now they are looking at motive. The investigation continues from here. We appreciate all of your insights. Rodney Harrison, thank you.
Thank you.
Vice President Harris is expected to discuss today's shooting in her opening remarks at a campaign event in New Hampshire.
We're going to bring you those remarks when they happen. For now, a short break. You're watching CBS News 24/7.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate. Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes.
Did you ever have these problems before the derailment?
No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing or bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
Or you can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm John Dickerson. Join me for the Daily Report, weekdays on CBS News 24/7.
Okay, let's go. You guys good?
Hey.
All right, we good?
Keep going. The clock, it's ticking.
Off we go.
60 minutes. 60 minutes.
60 minutes.
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS.
It's just about 3 p.m. here on the East Coast and in New Hampshire, where Vice President Harris will be speaking at a campaign event. The pre-program has just started. We know that the vice president is expected to address today's shooting at a high school in Georgia. When she begins her remarks, we will take you over there live.
And we do want to get you the latest on this breaking news out of Georgia. A vigil planned at 7 p.m. in the town of Winder after at least 4 people were killed, 9 others taken to hospital during what's described as a school shooting outside of Atlanta.
Police say a suspect is in custody. Those shots fired at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia, roughly 50 miles northeast of the capital of Atlanta.
Now, the FBI's Atlanta field office is there on the scene. We've seen them there all day. They're assisting with the investigation. But officials say it will take many days to uncover exactly what took place there this morning. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has also directed all available state resources to respond to this. The Barrow County Sheriff held a news conference earlier and said this investigation is just beginning. He is asking people to be patient.
This is a very, very fluid investigation. It's very early. And I have asked the assistance of the GBI and the agencies here behind me today, and there are multiple agencies that responded this morning to help us and help the sheriff's office. We do have a suspect in custody, and we are asking for your patience as the media to please let us get the facts that we need to make sure we get this right.
Parents have been reuniting with their children. Our CBS News' Dave Malkoff has been describing a very emotional scene with parents running to their children. And we heard from one 10th grader describing what happened after he heard shots fired while sitting in a classroom. Take a listen.
I was in class and we heard shots. The teacher ran, slammed the door, made us all go in the corner. We heard like the teachers and everything in the hallways, the police. We heard like the shooting, and then we heard that they ran away. And then after a while, they came and took us out to the football field.
CBS News national correspondent Dave Malkoff is there on the scene. You see him in Winder, Georgia. David, as we heard from Aiden Navarro, he also explained that he had to leave all of his stuff behind. So all of his possessions are back there on campus. There's this scramble for parents to reunite with their kids. What are you seeing?
Hello, Errol. Hello, Lana. It is really difficult for parents to get to this scene because the entire area is locked down, and not only that, but they also have cars. Sorry, there was someone walking by. They also have cars that are packed up all over the street, and it's hard to get by those cars. So we did talk to a woman who came running because her neighbor's son was in there. He's in 12th grade, and his mother couldn't get here. She is an hour away in the Atlanta area, so she came running. She said she had to run for 2.5 miles through all those cars to get here, but that's what a lot of parents are doing. They are just abandoning their cars by the side of the street and running in here. The FBI has arrived on scene just a few minutes ago. We did see lots of school buses arrive. Those students were staged out behind me on the football field while they were assessing the situation inside.
Dave, I'm not sure if we still have you. Did we lose you, Dave?
Can you hear me still?
Yes, we got you back. Please continue.
Okay, so there's, I was saying there's multiple law enforcement agencies here, all the way from the FBI to the GBI to Sheriff's Department, and also local law enforcement from all over that are trying to assess the situation. We have a State Patrol car going behind us right now. We have seen at least 2 medevac helicopters come from this school. CBS News has confirmed that there are 2 people who were killed in this shooting. My colleague Mark Strassman just talked to a student who had gone through this drill over and over again. Students here in Georgia, I have kids in Georgia schools in APS, and they go through these drills as young as elementary school. And at the very beginning of this situation, they thought it was a drill, but the teachers told them that this is actually the real thing, and they were really panicked the way that you could imagine that students would be. They tried to call out to their parents. Some students were able to get a phone call out to their parents and have anybody come here and actually put eyes on them, give them a hug, tell them that everything's all right. But right now,
Dave, unfortunately, it seems like your microphone continues to go out. If you have us back, when we were hearing from you before, we were hearing that that some school buses were leaving. Do you know anything more about efforts to reunite families, parents with their children? Are there still a lot of children, or sorry, they're high schoolers? Are there still a lot of high schoolers that are there on the football field waiting to go home at this point, or have they mostly dissipated?
Lana, those reunions are happening right now. They are able to one by one have the students come out of that lockdown area in the back of the high school at the football field, have them come up and reunite with their parents, who are both in tears and both very emotional about what happened today. It happened about 9:30, and some of the students actually thought this was a drill, but it was the real thing. And we do have parents reuniting with their kids. 2 school buses. I see another one coming down here. Not sure if anybody's on there, but the 2 school buses did come through here empty, waiting to pick up kids. And as we see, if we just hang on here for a second, we can see if there is anybody on this school bus that's coming through. It doesn't appear that any students the way that they would be able to take some of the kids back from this tragic situation back to a place that they call home, that they can feel safe and feel that they are in some sort of reunion with their families, with something that is safe and normal and comfortable for them after this day, which is a day they prepare for, but a day they hoped would never come. But unfortunately, here at Appalachia High School, it came for them at 9:30 a.m. this morning.
So unnerving for so many people. Dave Markoff, thank you very much.
As promised, we are bringing you Vice President Harris, who's speaking at a campaign event in New Hampshire. We expect her to address that school shooting that took place earlier today in Winder, Georgia. Let's go ahead and give a listen to what the Vice President has to say.
Hi, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Thank you all. Thank you. 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 It's so good to be back in New Hampshire. Thank you all. Thank you. And Doug sends his love to everyone as well. Oh, thank you, everyone. Nicole, thank you. You guys are just so extraordinary, and I applaud the way you do the business that you do and the love that you do in giving community. I love our small business owners. It is what you do. I'm going to talk a bit about you in a minute, but you are part of the fabric, the essential fabric of a community that cares about one another. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you to the outstanding congressional delegation, Senators Shaheen, Hassan, Representatives Pappas and Custer, and all the leaders who are here today. Thank you all. Thank you all for taking the time to be here this afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. So before I begin, I do want to say a few words about this tragic shooting that took place this morning in Winder, Georgia. We're still gathering information about what happened, but we know that there were multiple fatalities and injuries. And, you know, our hearts are with all the students, the teachers, and their families, of course. And we are grateful to the first responders and the law enforcement that were on the scene. But this is just a senseless tragedy on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all. You know, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. So we will continue, of course, to send our prayers and our thoughts to the families and all those who were affected, including, you know, I'm going off script right now, but listen, I mean, you know, at the last year, I started a college tour. And I traveled our country meeting with our young leaders, right? And so it was college-age young leaders. So I did trade schools, colleges, universities, community colleges. By the way, I love Gen Z. I just love Gen Z. Right? But I'll tell you, one of the things that I asked every time I went to the auditorium, and it would be filled with these young leaders, students, and I'd ask them, raise your hand if at any point between kindergarten and 12th grade you had to endure an active shooter drill. And for the young leaders who are here who are raising their hand, I'm telling you, every time the auditorium was packed and almost every hand went up. You know, a lot of us, I'll speak about myself, you know, we had, well, I grew up in California, earthquake drills, we had fire drills, but our kids are sitting in a classroom where they should be fulfilling their God-given potential, and some part of their big, beautiful brain is concerned about a shooter busting through the door of the classroom. It does not have to be this way. It does not have to be this way. And, you know, this is one of the many issues that's at stake in this election. So New Hampshire, look, we have 62 days to go. 62 days to go. And I'm going to tell you what you already know. This race is going to be tight until the very end. So please, let's not pay too much attention to the polls, because we are running as the underdog. We know what they're capable of on the other side. The only thing we can take for granted is the love that we as Americans have for each other, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And we've got some hard work ahead, but we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And so we are up for the task, and with your help, we will win in November. We will win in November. And that, in large part, is because we know what we stand for, and when you know what you stand for, you know what to fight for. We love our country, and we believe in the promise of America. That's so much of what I think brings us all together this afternoon. We believe in the promise of America, and that includes a topic we're going to discuss today, which is what I call an opportunity economy, building an opportunity economy. And my vision of an opportunity economy is one where everyone can compete and have a real chance to succeed, where everyone, regardless of who they are, where they start, can build wealth, including intergenerational wealth, where workers are treated with dignity and everyone has the freedom to join a union if they choose, where we remove barriers to opportunity so anyone who wants to start a business can have access to the tools and the resources they need to do that. I believe, and I said it before to Nicole, I believe America's small businesses are an essential foundation to our entire economy. Think about it. Think about it. Small businesses in our country employ half of all private sector workers. Half of all private sector workers own or run a small business or work for a small business. They do trillions of dollars of business every year. They generate revenue that helps repair our roads and pay our teachers. And you know, for all of those who are or know of small business owners, the thing I love about you is that you're not only leaders in business, you are civic leaders. You are community leaders. You are mentors. You hire locally. You believe in the community, and you're part of the glue of the fabric that holds communities together. You provide the local meeting space. You are the types of folks where you know who your regulars are, and when someone's walking in the door and you can tell they've had a bad day, you know exactly what they need. Isn't that the best of who we are?
All right, we've been listening there to Vice President Harris speaking at a campaign event there in Northampton, New Hampshire. And as you heard, she began by delivering remarks on the shooting there in Winder, Georgia this morning. She said it was a senseless tragedy. She emphasized it's outrageous that people should have to send their kids to school worried that they come home alive. And she reiterated in plain-spoken English that it just doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah, the vice president said that our kids are concerned that a shooter could be busting in the classroom. She said that part of their big, beautiful brains are occupying their space with that rather than what they should be learning. Well, it is obviously a campaign season, and the economy, inflation, and reproductive rights have been some of the major issues that we've heard of throughout this year's election.
Now, of course, with this morning's news, gun control has been moved up from the back seat and is at the forefront of many people's minds today.
CBS News campaign reporter Hunter Woodall is following the reaction from both campaigns. And Hunter, we heard the vice president going off script, she said, to describe gun violence as an epidemic. How important is this issue to the Harris-Walz platform?
Well, when you look at the Democratic platform, and especially the approach that Vice President Harris and her running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, have taken, this is an issue that clearly matters a lot to them, but it's also clear how much, younger voters care and are worried about this issue. You have, a generation that has, gotten used to gun violence being a constant challenge, a constant threat to them, and continues to alarm them. So as you see this issue permeate, as you see people mourn the deaths and the violence we've seen today, it's likely that we'll see this continue to be a major campaign issue and even gain more veracity as we get closer to this upcoming debate.
And so then, Hunter, what are the policy, prescriptions that voters should be looking for from both candidates? We've heard from the White House, President Biden emphasized red flag laws, national background checks. What else did the press secretary say? Requiring safe storage and banning assault weapons with high-capacity magazines. But I didn't hear Harris refer to any of that in this speech where she just made brief remarks. So what are the policy solutions being suggested?
Well, the reality is any policy solutions, especially the ones you just mentioned, will probably have to go through Congress. And it is unlikely, given the partisan control of Congress, the filibuster in the Senate, a major gun legislation can get through. Now, we have seen gun safety legislation passed during President Biden's time in office, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. But that was a challenge in itself, and that was still less far-reaching than some Democrats wanted in terms of gun control, gun safety. So especially in light of the tragedy we've seen today, you think that gun violence and answering this in Congress could be a major concern, but getting this through, given how the power Republicans still have, especially with that legislative filibuster in the Senate, that will be a challenge for anybody wanting to make change in Washington on this issue.
And Hunter, all parents, Republicans or Democrats, want their kids to be safe in schools. We've heard today from the Democrats. Can you tell us anything about either what President Trump did when he was in office or what candidate Trump says he would like to do to try and combat this very real issue?
Well, it's one that is, it's difficult for Republicans because Republicans obviously respond to this. They mourn what's happened. They're concerned about what's happened. But any gun legislation, any answer to gun violence, it can be a major challenge for Republicans to answer to, given still the power of the National Rifle Association and the like in Republican politics. So the policy solutions, they can be thin, but you're obviously seeing people concerned, people are responding to this violence and outraged. But what can actually change in Washington, what will change in Washington, is a constant challenge that we're unlikely to see, answered anytime soon.
And Hunter, you mentioned the filibuster in the Senate, which can prevent new policies from being passed. The Harris campaign recently announced that it will spend $25 million from its war chest and transfer it to down-ballot races and Democratic candidates all over the country. I guess this really underscores and emphasizes why those races are just as key as winning the White House for both parties.
That's absolutely right, Errol. And that's the thing. So much attention goes to the presidential race, but these down-ballot races, these Senate races, these House races will matter immensely because regardless if it's, Trump back in the White House or it's Vice President Harris becoming president, what happens in Congress, who has control of Congress, will have a major say in what happens. And especially when you look at, all these current events happening, whether domestic or international, those down-ballot races will help decide the future of the country and exactly how any president can answer to any, issues that we're seeing today.
All right.
All right, Hunter Woodall, thanks so much.
Thanks, Hunter. We are going to take a short break, but we have a lot of news to cover, so stay with us.
These are the stories
1, 2, 3, go!
of We the People.
We're trying to generate our own hope.
It's a huge deal.
I'm enabling them to feel valued.
Eye on America, weeknights on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides. Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
exclusively on CBS News 24/7, the streaming home of CBS News.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
We turn now to extreme weather across the South.
Flood watches are in effect across central and southern Texas today. Yesterday, streets in San Antonio were turned into rivers as floodwaters surrounded homes, businesses, and vehicles. In Galveston, people were told to immediately move to higher ground. And today, residents are being urged to avoid flooded roads with the threat of more rain expected throughout the week.
Meantime, more than 60 million people in the western U.S. are under heat alerts.
That's right. Temperatures could exceed 110 degrees in the southwest. Yesterday, Phoenix marked its 100th straight day with at least 100-degree temperatures.
But over here on the East Coast, many are seeing what you could describe as a pre-fall cool down and some storms. Storm specialist Greg Postel from our partners at the Weather Channel has your forecast. Hey there, Greg.
Well, good day, Lana and Errol. It is going to be kind of a messy day with rain throughout the evening and overnight hours tonight along the Gulf Coast. Scattered showers and thunderstorms, mostly offshore, but still some making their way inbound to parts of Louisiana and Texas and areas nearby. The background shaded in green is the threat for some flooding. So some of those rainmakers will be very efficient in producing some heavy rainfall rates, which could lead to flooding across the region. Animating this out as we go through the overnight and morning hours, a lot of heavy rain rain, again, mostly over the water, but now starting to move northward inland as you go through tomorrow and tomorrow evening, all the way from Florida, the I-10 corridor through parts of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, into Texas. Heads up, it is going to be more rainy than not. Maybe not every hour of the day, but definitely stormy times and producing a lot of rain across the region. You can see when you add it up, through Saturday, 3 to 5 inches of rain across parts of Louisiana, even locally higher amounts than that in Texas. But what about another weather system that's coming into the northern tier of the United States? A September-like fall cold front is coming in, and it's not just going to impact many of us here in the Great Lakes like Chicago, Minneapolis, Madison, Wisconsin. No, this one's going to make it all the way to the south, and behind it, over the late week period, we are going to likely see temperatures 10 to 20 degrees below average, highs in the 60s behind it, and then that front will cross the East Coast and eventually cool everyone down, even along the I-95 corridor. Get updates to your forecast for the neighborhood of the Weather Channel on cable or live on your favorite TV streaming device. Lana and Errol, back to you.
All right, Greg, thanks very much.
Monsoon rainfall is bringing deadly flooding to India and Pakistan. Drone video shows roads completely flooded in western India. Officials say at least 33 people have been killed in India this week, while 5 children have died in Pakistan. More than 4,000 people in India have been evacuated. This is the last month of monsoon season in the area.
All right, we're going to take a very short break.
Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gailey has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just